Hello everyone. Jerison, good evening from high Mars orbit. That'd be so cool. That would be so cool. Hello Osprey, Finds Brewery Supply. Very gratefully received. Although this evening I think I should be short some chocolate bars. Ooh. Oh. Let's see. I have to say, the advert before my video looks very, very cool and very, very interesting. Sorry. I got distracted by the Naval advert before my video. Like I say, it looks cool. Thank you, Osprey. Super chats are always very, very welcome for the Iron Brew supply. It's critical. That and the chocolate bar supply are critical. Chocolate bar and the Iron Brew supply, yeah. Basically, I'm a dentist, either dream or nightmare, depending on your perspective. Hello, Mattis. Hello, Richard. Hello, Sean. Hello, Bandholm. Hello, Jay. Hello, Albert. Hello, Jeff. Hello, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hello, Kevin. Thank you, Chocolate. Hello, Richard. Hello, Jay. Hello, Thomas. I think that's everyone who's in a message. Hi, Ian. Bristol. Hello, Louise, Anne, and Eric for watching, and thank you again for this. Hi, Felix. My current dentist probably wouldn't watch these streams, but my dentist I had when I was a kid wouldn't be watching these streams. Probably is watching these streams, knowing Dr. Esmond. He was very, very loved naval history. Well, at least I think he did. He used to talk to me about it when I was in the chair, so you know. Good evening, Tony. Richard Holmes, do you have a PayPal link to donate to cut out Milmerton? No, I think Sean Mack has very kindly sent me the details for how to set that up, but I haven't set it up. So at the moment, it's Patreon or it's YouTube. Honestly, I should probably have something set up, but I am still setting these things up as I'm going. A very heavy high and brewer night ahead. Now, I actually keep just up with the signal. Hi, Martin. Michael, afternoon from Wales. Sadly forgot to break up my Iron Brew yesterday. Oh, you poor man. I feel so sorry for you. They've had Iron Brew is not a good day. Ataki Loki. Hello, Doc. Thanks for response to my question on the earlier video. Well, my policy is always to respond as long as I find the comments. I do find that YouTube has a habit of hiding comments when they're responses to responses. You know, which I find a bit cruel, because that's a conversation I'm interested in, so I have to make sure I deselect the automatic selection it has of filtering out the ones I responded to, and then I can find it, and then I can respond back when I get a message. Also, it only seems to tell me, it only emails me about every other time. Should have an Amazon wish list. Possibly, considering the books I am currently looking at buying, yes, possibly should have an Amazon wish list. Hello, Eric. It's just things like, well, you all know I have Volume 1 and 2 of these Naval Weapons series. Volume 3 comes out soon, and that's coastal ships. And frankly, the series has been excellent, so yeah, very much looking forward to that. Gemma, would like to get you a new webcam. People have offered this to me very kindly, and I've said no, because my university is supposed to be supplying me with one. And they are supposed to do it, and therefore I do not want to give them an excuse not to. I will, though, get around to setting up a PayPal link. Austin Hammond. Good afternoon from the West US. This channel introduced me both to the wonderful chaos of naval history and Iron Brew. I regret nothing. I love it. Daniel Freeman. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Brock. Yeah, so basically that's my only fight with them. Although I have to admit, it does work out quite well so far on certain things. I'm always getting the videos right. Universities don't trust them to get you equipment. I used to be a university IT technician. That's how I worked my way through my bachelor's. And yeah, I'd agree with that. How's the Fluffy Research Assistant? The Fluffy Research Assistant is having a lovely time in the garden at the moment. I fixed the pond over the weekend and managed to get it all working again. And so it's had some, you know, it's had some fish now put back in it because the fish had all died. And now the dog is, Raleigh, my Fluffy Research Assistant, is sitting watching the fish go around in the pond. And he's absolutely amazed. He's just sort of watching them like this. It's quite funny to watch. But he's having a good time. He's sleeping quite a lot as well. He's still a puppy. He's still growing. So, you know, that's okay. Brock Paint. I found Iron Brew in the US, but it's really expensive. $2 for a 17-ounce bottle. Ouch! Tony Benfold. What firepower would HMS Iron Brew not have? Probably what would she not have would be a more question. Good evening, John. Kevin Target. How deep is their endowment? It's Kingston University. I love them dearly, but, you know... Osprey 28. I want to get you a Senhai. That sounds really, really fancy. That sounds really, really fancy. Anyway, thank you very much for all that kindness. But today we're doing not the big ships, which are probably good. 1901 is the original Iron Brew. Hello to Carl. I remember when I started doing these, there was about 10 people. Now there's usually 60. See my son gun order me Iron Brew from Amazon. Oh. Brock Payne, yes, I got one bottle. I think I'll save it for Sunday brew ships. Enjoy. You will like it. I have to say, yeah, this stuff keeps me going. It keeps me sane. Evening, Ian. Shumack, Iron Brew unfortunately has caffeine in it, so it breaks my rule of drink choices. That is annoying. RF4, hey Doc, I just opened up my first Iron Brew. What in the name of all the earliest Okay, we are going to get serious in a second, but yes. Hello. Iron Brew is, it is special. It is special. So, look. Yeah, Daniel Freeman. Sane is a relative term, I always feel, you know. I explained to my girlfriend on many occasions, my sanity is not something I guarantee. Everything's better than the supplement shakes. So, first off, when I was starting looking at this subject of naval gunfire support, it was working out where to start. Because do you start with the Romans and the galley work they used to do? Because they used to use their galleys and would mount catapults and various other siege equipment on them as part of ship content, but also for their actual whole thing in terms of sieges. In fact, the siege of Syracuse was entirely ship-based artillery. There was land-based, there was some land units there, but most of the artillery was either ship-based stuff which was taken ashore, or ship-based stuff fired from ships. So it was all entirely, you know, their bombardment. But trying to differentiate triremes, biremes, and quinteremes, and working out which one of them would classify as a destroyer, which one as an auto-destroyer, and all these things. I decided very quickly that, frankly, wasn't going to take a lot of time. So I went to the Age of Nelson and I decided my destroyer ranks in as a 4th rate. Mainly because frigates are sort of 5th, 6th rates, and I decided to pick the one above it was be a destroyer. So I decided 4th rates and below actions. It makes sense. Adam, I've started to realise that Denmark should do is to buy the places that make iron brew and install the Scots and new historians. Extort us for a short while, then there might be a revolution on your hands. Kevin Tech, then our PT boats 11th rates. Well, interesting. It goes down to 6th rate. And then you have brigs and sloops beneath that. Even occasionally some ships called swans. And even below that, you'd have cutters and all sorts of things. Alexander, river crossing using catapults on opposite of a river in Anglia. First I read of fire support. Ongers and such much more mobile. Yeah. Are you sure, Jane Wolf, are you sure it wouldn't qualify as res? Basically a 4th rate is where I was picking at, because then that's a 40 gun, 44 gunner ship usually. So that's why I was sort of, a res, usually is equivalent to a 4th rate. So you have a res as well. Both are usually about 44 guns, but one's made as a 44 gun ship. The other one is cut down. Usually they take a old 3rd rate and they slice a deck off her. And once you've removed all that top weight, it's amazing how heavier guns you can mount on her. It's brilliant. Who'd have thought it? Thank you, SKR. That's very kind of you. When did the first 40mm first go to sea? Well, that's an interesting thing, because they're actually 40mm technically weapons, 2-pounder weapons, going to sea in the 1860s and 1870s. But 40mm, as we would start to understand them as a rapid fire weapon, probably about the 1890s. Has the cordite gunpowder changed much since World War I? Well, actually, we're going to be getting into that in a bit, so you know. Yep. Paul Johnson, I thought 4th rate was 55 guns to 64 like Agamemnon. Actually, anything more than 44 guns, but less than 60 guns is technically a 4th rate. And then you'd have the 3rd rate would be anything more than 60 guns up to roughly 74, 76 guns. Once you get over that, you're talking a 2nd rate category, and then boom, boom, boom. Because actually putting in those extra few guns is a lot. Jeff Beeler, is Louise interested in presenting on YouTube? I keep trying to suggest it to her, but I don't think I'm going to win that argument. But I'm going to keep trying, because she will be very good. And she could tell you all about how the various different things we have, misconceptions we have on propaganda versus reality in the media. And the history of Falklands War and all sorts of stuff. Blue Shirt Buddha, Adler Scott, is it true that troops ashore prefer the gunfire support from destroyers and small ships as opposed to battleships and cruisers? As a rule, what happened, and we're going to get into this, and I'll do this as a general discussion session because I've done the introductions properly. So, what the troops tended to like was they tended to prefer, if they were having direct fire support, they would have, i.e. direct on-call fire support, they would want the smaller ships, the cruisers and the destroyers, and occasionally the smaller ships, because the fire would tend to come in at a slightly flatter trajectory, and would tend to be focused and more precise. After all, when you're a battleship and you're aiming at another battleship, getting things within 2 feet of the target tends to work of where you're aiming. When you're a destroyer, it's a lot narrower. And when you're on call fire support and asking for help and you're infantry in a battle, you want that fire support, that to be as narrow a vacuum, as a narrower cone as possible. It saves you. Hi, Kai. And it's basically, that's the possibility. That's the thing. Now, I think cordite is replaced by modern nitrocellulose, or at least partly, as a lot of modern ammo still has that cordite smell, or at least army ammunition. The ammunition has evolved in terms of explosive materials, and they have found ways to enhance a lot of it as well. John Hart, where can I find what Inside a Turret looks like? Book suggestions. It's this series, but this is Escorts and Minesweepers, so it's got Escorts and Minesweepers, surprisingly enough. But the next one is Coastal Ships, and then book 4 is going to be the bigger ships. So it's this series, the John Lambert World of British Naval Weapons of World War II series. That will have that. Steamlight. D-Day, scraping bottoms provided 5-inch or 4.5-inch or 4.7-inch, depending on the navies. Mostly it was the Royal Navy, so mostly it was 4.7. Their support to knock out bankers. Seems Tiger's armour all like paper to a 5-inch. It was very interesting. Armour-piercing 4.7-inch rounds were really quite effective in the anti-tank mode. We're not quite sure why, but the Panzer IVs, which did show up, had a really fun time with them. Really, really fun time with them. Most destroyers have access to armor-piercing or high explosives, so they can use either. Some of them even have AA shells. I think some of them were mounting phosphorus, of course, shells, which are supposed to illuminate things. But they found that the phosphorus burning shell is also quite useful for using on bunkers. Can't think why sending something which burns at a very high temperature and sets everything it comes in contact with a light is at all good at aiming at bunkers. Just know I'd prefer not to be anywhere near it. Part 2 of the introduction will be uploaded when? It's ready to go. It's literally sitting there. It was all made ready and all happy with YouTube at exactly... I uploaded it at 10 to 5, thinking it would be ready because it's only 30 minutes long at 5 o'clock, and it's still not happy with it, but it's yeah, it should be ready to go by the end of this. I'll put it on afterwards. Jeff Beeler. Reading Amphibious Assault San Carlos, HMS Avenger just have been sunk doing shore bombardment. Clapped like the Type 21 shore bombardment because of the way their 4.5 was mounted. Mortar mobility? Well, actually, you'll be unsurprised to know that considering what they were used for, they make it into part 2 in the Falcons. And the 4.5-inch on the Amazon class, the Type 21s, was actually very well pronounced forward, but also it was very stable because of the hull shape. And if you look at the modern design for the Type 26 hull, and look at that, and also take a look at the hull shape for the Type 23s, you'll notice something. Now, he also liked Yarmouth and her sisters as well, so the Type 12s, because their double 4.5-inch was equivalent to a battery of 10 guns. So these are equivalent to a battery of half a battery, about 4 guns. Double 4.5 inch is equivalent to about 10 guns, because despite them only having a double rate of fire, because they're more accurate in terms of their consistency and because they can keep it up, they actually work in as the equivalent of about 10 guns. So that's 10 105mm guns. That's 4 105mm guns in terms of fire support. So this is why Goose Green is started by HMS Arrow, and this is why Tumbledown really doesn't get going until Yarmouth and Active go, hello, we're here. We're just going to signal our appreciation for you in high explosive. It worked quite well. Chaffers and Bray, we didn't understand the effect that artillery in general had on tanks until the 70s. We assumed they required a direct hit. In fact, artillery wrecks the weaker sides of tanks. Yes, it does. And one of the interesting things is, again, the Navy's got this earlier than the Army did, because if you look at the Navy fire support and the Navy aiming for how it's supporting operations in Korea and in parts of World War II, the Navy's using this consistently in terms of their fire plans. And when they're firing, they're going, okay, get them as close as you can in the direction of the tanks, because that will work. That will do it. But look, I put up part 3 of some lessons learned, okay? Lessons learned in blood, sweat and tears just today. And one of the things I was talking about was the air defense at sea issues. And the point is this: when in peacetime, everyone talks about killing their opponents when they're talking about air defense. They always talk about the missiles kill ratio and how likelihood it is to take out the enemy. When you're in wartime, you don't care so much about killing them as stopping their attack. Killing would be nice, because that will stop their attacks permanently, but you'll settle for just stopping their attack. Which is why the 40mm comes in. Pardon me. Right then, let's see. There we go. In car, HMS Rodney, 16-inch chasing a tank was a good story at Normandy. If a 16-inch shell was chasing me in the tank, I'd be out the tank. My policy would be to get as far away from the tank that as the target as possible. Shomak, I believe that is what the chieftain would call a significant emotional event. That is what many people call a significant emotional event. Yeah, thank you. Hi, John. Austin Hammond, hello. I'm fairly certain even 4.7-inch high explosive would delete a Panzer IV and probably at the least knock out a Panzer 6 or 5. Probably. Let's be honest. If they hit the weaker sides, the high explosive is still going to wreck them. Especially take out their tracks. Yeah, that will do significant damage. And that's the thing when you realise about, when you're talking, it was the big point that the Colonel of the Army specialised in naval gunfire support and the Royal Marines made to the Army when they were units, when they were down in the Falklands, was that what they considered heavy artillery, the Royal Navy considers a standard gun. So when they were calling for a fire support mission and they were going, oh, we're going to need so much fire support for this, the Royal Marines and the Colonel would go, no, you need about 1 frigate. Why? Just watch. The 1 frigate would be on the fire line, would be called up and go, we have this problem. Oh, you have a problem? Where is the problem? Give us the coordinates. Coordinates in. Thank you. Say goodbye to the problem. And within 5 minutes worth of firing, the problem wouldn't exist anymore. It would have had 60-odd rounds of high explosive dropped around it, and it would cease to be a problem for anyone. That was what they were dealing with. Jay Riston, a Dunkirk RN destroyer engaged a German tank unit in direct fire mode and the Germans got obliterated, to say the least. I think that was actually a W-class destroyer, wasn't it? Felix B. De Lutzer, ex-Deutschland, was even half sunken, the bane of the Russian tanks. Yes, she was. In Happy Carl loves those. Gemma, another thing, typical World War II destroyer would carry equivalent of about 1/6 artillery of an infantry division, often composed of stronger guns. 4.7 inch versus. Well, yes, if you consider it, if a tribal class destroyer turns up and starts firing, let's say post X turret conversion, it would have 6 4.7 inch guns, which is your 620 millimeter guns, and 2 4-inch, so 200 millimeters high angle, theoretically AA, but can be used for other things. With a rate of fire and their own a rate of fire, which still made them pretty significant advantage over their conventional land-based equivalent. You've got a lot of firepower turning up, and that's just a tribal. John Hart has put John Richardson, an RN destroyer in Boulogne Harbour fired at a Panzer Mark III and it somersaulted backwards. That was a Panzer Mark III, though. It's kind of, like some other scenarios. If that's what's damaged, then we we overlook it. Although I quite like the Panzer IIIs. Jefferson Bay, 25 pounder was only an 88 millimeter. Considered that a 4-inch was equivalent to 105, though in terms of rate of fire equivalent to a battery. When you've got a double 4-inch mount, you have probably got the equivalent of a 6-gun battery, possibly even an 8-gun battery in World War II, with their rate of fire. And also there's the stability and their chain of supply, because you have to remember, for a land-based unit, they've got to move all their stuff, keep it going, and they might run out, whereas the ship's just taking everything with it. Calvin Gasback, around 4.5 inch and up, an HE shell could turn a Panzer IV or a Stug upside down. Probably. 4.7 inches were pretty heavily loaded. Jerichen, put the off-putting barrage in front of the enemy attack as opposed to direct fire, shoot to kill, result in loss of Prince of Wales and Rolls. Sort of. Martin Doherty, was the concussion effect of the Navy's guns against armour as velocity was superior to Army's artillery? The concussion effect is significant. You have to also remember that the naval shells are bigger in many, many ways, not just in terms of their size, but also in terms often of their length. Because on a naval crew, it has more manpower, so it can rotate in loaders. And they've got more space to maneuver. Their turrets are bigger, or in case of tribals or other destroyers of their generation, they have mounts, not turrets. So they have just a sort of shield in front of them, which is armoured, but then they have open space behind them. So they have plenty of space to move around a far bigger round than you could fit in a tank's gun. In Happy, how long could a frigate in the Falcons campaign stay in the gunfire support role before emptying its magazine? Ooh, well, they carry between 200 and 300 rounds per gun as a rule, so they would have to go and reload after they'd done, let's say, 25 minutes worth of firing, consistent firing. If they just kept up constant firing, if they weren't doing fire check. But they did have some facilities to reload, but still, Britain was running low on ammo. The ammunition supplies, they were running very low. More arrived with HMS Bristol's group, but before that, they were running very low. And they basically knew that if Bristol's group didn't arrive on time, they were going to have no Naval gunfire support because they'd used up so much already. J. Ingworth. Therefore, a frigate is less of a problem solver as a problem eliminator. Certainly was from an artillery perspective. Jeff Beeler. The 4.7 was good so good the British mounted 2 singles on landing crafts so they could get closer. Yes, they did. They did all sorts of things. As we talked about in the landing craft specials, there were a lot of very, very special landing craft put together. Donald Fritz, what caliber of gun would you think is best for naval gunfire support? And also, didn't a few US and Brooklyn class get into a duel with Tigers in Italy? Yes, they did, and that was a bad day for the tanks. There were a few bad days for tanks. Basically, if you're a tank and you get caught by a cruiser, you probably have respectfully withdrawn. Cruisers' 6-inch guns. If you consider, it's only today that we're starting to consider potentially putting 150mm guns on tanks, right? World War II, they're nowhere near that. And definitely not armoured for that. A 6-inch cruiser is in your way, sort of going, I would like to be not here. I feel that my presence is needed and preferable elsewhere, and I will be heading there as quickly as possible. So yeah, not a fun time. But for gun caliber, it's... Honestly, the balance of all things told, I'd probably go for the 6-inch because depends. It's between the 6 and the 8-inch. Probably is the best caliber for naval gunfire support. But these days you go for what's available, which is the 5-inch. So 5-inch. But if I had to pick a caliber, I would probably have gone with a 6-inch because you can more easily make the 6-inch a dual-purpose weapon. So it can do AA and all those other things like the 5-inch does, which is what I would do. So I can technically aim it was air defense as well and all sort of dual purpose, but actually it's mainly for fire support because 6-inch is just is a monster for fire support. Rate of fire is just... Raphael 1981. Hello, and where did that advantage in rate of fire rate versus land-based artillery come from? Okay. That comes from many, many books I've read over the years. But basically, the advantage comes from the mechanisms and systems that a ship can carry around. The ship's weapon mount will be far heavier than a tank's will. Ships or a vehicle or any artillery one. It'll be far heavier. It'll be able to take far more pounding in terms of rate of fire. And you'll have a far bigger crew. If you consider your gun crew on a... Tribal class destroyer on their double guns could easily be 16 people, a team of 16. Whereas you think your artillery crew ashore will have 4 or 5. Your tank will have a crew of 4, of which how many are actually involved in the gunner and running the gun? 1 gunner, 1 loader. So you will have a lot more people to move things a lot quicker. They will have far more precise jobs around. And it just becomes a very, very high speed machine. It's a factory process of firing. It is really factory fire. Now, of course, the British systems are all the new standard single 4.5 is a autoloader system, which is also a fairly high rate of fire. Again, fairly high, very high compared to most tanks and most artillery, and it can keep it up because that's a good thing about machines. They don't tire. The same trick was used, of course, why you had so many people, because then you could spread out the load and you wouldn't tire, so you could keep up that rate of fire. Ian Carr, would bofers and pom-poms both be used in sport role? Yes. Basically, torture people. Boom, 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 boom. It's a heavy rate of fire. And honestly, the 40mm is probably not going to damage a tank, but most armoured cars, if you think most of the bunker positions, any infantry or who are out in the open, a 40mm is definitely not going to be something you want coming your way. Tony Penfold, did RN ships in the Napoleonic Wars have different shot for land bombardment? What about the bomber ships? They didn't have different shot for land bombardment in terms of the ships. The regular ships line would just use the same cannonballs, the same iron shot they normally did, which is probably has an effect on their impact. But they did have advantages in terms of maneuver versus the land and based stuff. The mortars were firing shells. The bomb ships were a mortar firing a mortar bomb, which would literally was a high explosive shell, land, boom, massive explosion. And they were really, really precise. They were also had to be really strong ships. They had a very strong hulls, but they also had a very strong central work. So they'd often have far more wood internally. So they'd have far more columns and sort of struts across, far more framing in their ship to make it strong enough to take the load of the mortars. All right, then. Daniel Freeman, just checked. At Waterloo, Wellington had 127 guns. How many at Trafalgar? Well, let's put it this way. 127 guns at Trafalgar would have filled out 2 Agamemnons, maybe, with one of them having a gun short. There are thousands of guns at Trafalgar. Literally. Thousands. Thomas Roller, how many gun rounds per main gun did destroyers have at D-Day? How quickly did they get reloads? They would have 250 to... Hang on, I have an Excel spreadsheet which has also 250 to 300 rounds again per gun. I just flicked up my spreadsheet. And they could quite quickly get reloads because they could tootle back to any British port, reload and be sent back. Pretty much there was ammunition waiting for the destroyers at pretty much every single port they could get into to just keep them going as quickly as possible. Same with cruisers. It was more difficult for battleships, but for cruisers and destroyers, they had pretty much endless supplies as far as they were concerned. George Crabbe, a friend was a forward observer during Vietnam. He said naval gunfire was the most accurate fire ever called in. That wouldn't surprise me. Navies spend a lot of time practicing it, and they have the advantage that they have all sorts of systems designed to compensate with exactly where they are. Jeff Beeler, did any ships in the Falcons run low or out of ammo? I think a couple did actually use up all their ammunition. I think that happened to some of the Type 21s, but I think they managed to get the supplies came through in time, but thankfully the war was over, but the supplies would have arrived in time. Right. Sugar HMS Malaya accidentally versus Genoa Cathedral. You can go and see the unexploded AP shell in a quiet corner. They may not be a Genoa Cathedral anymore had it been a functioning HE shell. Yeah, there wouldn't be. Sean Mack, the largest general gun on battlefield is a 155mm. The US Army had 203 heavy pieces. Bottom line is, on water they can make it bigger. Yes, well, of course they can, because you can move it round. It doesn't sink into the earth. You just have to build a big enough hole to displace that water. Austin Harmon, weren't there some RMS ships that actually wore their gun barrels out on the day? There were more than some. There were a lot of them. And they had new barrels fitted. They could change to new barrels quite quickly as well. Janewith, a 4.7-inch shell weighed in at 62 pounds. Get 6 of those from a tribal. Not much left of that. Yes, and you wouldn't just get 6 of those. Again, if I go to my Excel spreadsheet. Gun comparison chart. Now, so if you want the example, a tribal destroyer could, at a range of 15 kilometers, so in 10 minutes, at a range of 15 kilometers, a tribal class destroyer could deliver 21.3 tons of high explosive, or 456 shells within 5 minutes, 936 shells in 10 minutes. Think about that. 936 shells within 10 minutes. She would run out of shells if she kept up a consistent firing after 22 minutes. A town-class cruiser could deliver 47.82 tons of high explosive in 10 minutes on its target at 18 kilometers, and that would again be 936 shells. So that's the fun they bring to it. If you think about that, 936 shells landing on you in 10 minutes in your area. That's not fun. Okay. Answer that one. Stub, 5-inch rockets versus 5-inch guns. You don't really want to be on the receiving end of either, honestly. Sure, Mac, the 6-inch machine gun strikes again. Pretty much USS Texas versus Sniper. That just wasn't nice. Thank you for the suggestion, Lionheart. Right then. Would something like the First World War ex-Brazilian 3.6 shallow draft monitors being used as fire support in World War II landings? They could generally be getting really close together. Yes, they would have been. In fact, probably, you know, that would have been quite useful for ships to have, actually. Jeff ships that had much action did wear out their barrels. I think Warspite did by welcome. Warspite went through about, can't remember if it's 4 or 5 barrel changes, complete barrel changes in World War II. But she did have to change barrels. She did a lot of firing of her guns, and the barrels had to be changed. So the barrels would be done, and then they go and be relined, and then they go back into circulation. Which is, again, another reason why Britain should have standardised on the 15-inch gun. Because then we could have had the same pool of 15-inch barrels for all the ships, which would have made it far better logistically. But that's just me talking common sense. Jermac. Someone wants to want to take a look at effects on close eye explosion or tanks and other vehicles. I suggest photos Grom 2014 Ukraine. Okay. David, how does the RF of the 4.7-inch to the 5-inch 38 used by the USN? I understand the latter had a base ring mounting, which allowed a higher rate of fire. Okay, so 5-inch is a slightly younger design in respect than the 4.7-inch, and it does have a slightly higher rate of fire, but then the 4.5 has a slightly higher rate of fire than that. So they sort of mix in, but also in the nicest way, the 4.7 had a sort of small advantage when it came to, particularly to land warfare, in terms of the spacing of the mounts and the way the mounting was designed in terms of fire support. So it's all half a dozen 160 hour. Car gunning. Would a 6-inch be too big for an AA gun? What would be the ideal caliber of a single gun mount turret? 6-inch would be fine for an AA gun. You just have to make sure you have enough space for it to go up. What would be the ideal caliber for a single gun mount turret? Probably 6-inch again. Probably 6-inch again. Paul Johnson. Didn't the Allies find that the 6-inch was the best on D-Day rate of fire over larger calibers? 6-inch was definitely the best value for money in terms of their opinion, because it has slightly more hits than the 4.5, 4.7, or 5 inches, but it has a far higher rate of fire. As I said earlier, 936 shells in 10 minutes if they wanted to go all out from a town-class cruiser. That's just not fun to get in the way of. Thomas Rothwell, watched the part 1 intro. Could add Ottoman river gunboats on the Danube and Nile. British gunboats they made for the Crimean War. Yeah, all sorts of things they use gunboats for. Donald Fitz, how long would it take a Navy to, say, World War II year's end to produce enough 16-inch shells, and how many could they produce in peacetime over, say, 14-inch shells? Well, that depends on how much you prepared to order from the factories, because they're not producing them. They're getting factories and commercial interests to build them. So basically, they can order as many as they like, and the factories will produce them if they're prepared to pay for them. So it's expensive, but, you know, it's viable. Jay Richardson, at one point, the Italians tested a 76 Ottomalera on a Centurio tank destroyer. That would have been interesting. Banholm, was the double 4.5-inch guns on the ship like the Daring class automated? No. It was still, well, it had a degree of automation, but it still had a lot of crew involved, because that was found to be faster than a fully automated system at the time. Schumach, also naval guns are built stronger so they don't have to worry about barrel heating causing damage. Yep. Steamwhite, no Germans used brass 6-inch shells. RN and USN split charge and shell. Was it best? Hefting 6-inch shell like a weightlifter? Probably not. Let's be honest. It's not. You know, in the nicest way, it's not going to speed up, because if you think about it, if you divide it up, you can have 2 people lift it. So you can share the work, so people get less tired. So A, they're lifting less weight, and B, you can make it go faster. SKR, I read that dual-purpose guns weren't really that effective until around the end of World War II. What was the big problem? Turning rate, range finding? Range finding, mainly, and also, to an extent, it's the sighting issue and its accuracy, but they were getting good by the end of World War II, and they were fairly good halfway through World War II. They're acceptably good by halfway through World War II. Autoloki, speaking of bomb ships and monitors, why were the World War I monitors only 75% of an updated bomb ship? Right, so here's the thing. To make a monitor in World War I, what they do is they take basically a battleship-level turret with guns, and they stick them on a shallow draft ship. Now, the trouble is that battleship's guns are designed to engage another battleship. So yes, they can go fairly high to do some super firing, and to sort of get high to get their range, and so they can do a certain parabolic sort of arch. But if you want to be really, really good and do really plunging fire in support of troops, and as they did at Copenhagen, you need to be able to not go to here, you need to be able to go to here. You need to be able to go that much higher up, and they couldn't do that. So that's why I call them a sort of a not quite 100% solution. They are good. They are very good, because to get the full solution, you would have had to do a lot of development, and they didn't have time for the development. So they went with what they had available, which was quite good. But, you know, that's it. The plunging mortar equivalent fire plan could have been very, very useful. Okay. Donald Fitz, you see the new logo of the Soyuz class of Japan put out today, giving the Dragon a run for her money on the best Dragon design. Not surprised. Jeff Miller, check out Michael App's Wikipedia entry for an auto file of a Bofors in action. Ooh, cool. Frederick Vega, I heard that Warspite exhausted her complement of shells twice on the day. How many shells could they carry approximately? She would be carrying Theoretically, okay, theoretically. I just look at this. Theoretically, she is supposed to carry 400. She's supposed to be carrying about 300. No, that's it. She's supposed to be carrying a roughly 300 shells per gun. Actually, she was carrying a little bit more than that because she was as fully loaded as she could be. But still, it wasn't particularly brilliant. She would have got through about 800 rounds per gun that day. Angus O'Sonnell, has there been any undersea archaeology at Trafalgar? There's been lots done on there. But the trouble is most of the ships didn't sink there. They sank later in the storms. Carl von Kasman, tank versus cruiser. Use pre-dug fortified firing positions. Fire 1 to 3 rounds from one. Leave ASAP and then maybe try this from another. And use smoke mortars generously. That might be a good point. Carl Gangland, I believe HMS Victory alone had 104 guns and carronades at Trafalgar. Yep. Some of the ships had even more guns than that. Kevin Taggart, how many of those 300 rounds were duds? Very few. In fact, none as far as from memory. They didn't have much of a problem. They had a fairly good... the Royal Navy had a huge problem with quality control in World War One. That meant they did a whole lot of reforms, and they've been very, very hot on it ever since. Because they were sure the Germans only got away because their guns weren't working, their shells weren't working properly. Not because their gunners were missing, it was because their shells weren't working properly. The complete opposite of the Type 14 torpedo scenario. Stephen White, recoil mechs on land are more elaborate versus naval compact guns. Using massive ship to absorb. They have their own recoil systems to absorb, but also they have the fact that they're in the sea. That tends to help with recoil. Okay. The Brooklyn and Cleveland 6-inch cruisers were referred to as machine gun cruisers due to their rapid rate of fire. Very effective in the South Pacific. Yep. The Town class could also be added into that. Yep, they could be, because they were very, very fast. They had to be. That's the whole point of having a 6-inch gun. The thing is, rate of fire would make up for its less penetrative capabilities versus an 8-inch. So that's why you did a really, really high speed, really, really high rate of fire for the 6-inch. And Tony Penfold, wasn't the issue in the Falklands barrelware? There was some issue with it, but not as much as we'd probably think, because believe it or not many ships have been using their barrels that much before the Falklands War. So they hadn't had as many practices as they could have done. Some of them were going into battle with pretty much new guns. Only fired once or twice, you know, one careful owner sort of scenario. Thomas Rottweiler. Napoleonic ships versus bomb ships. Ships would fire solid shot horizontally. Bomb ships would fire over fortifications. Makes a good combination. It does. It makes a very good combination. Eric Cocken. Did naval artillery have any role in the medieval age, A1000 to 1400, except early gunpowder? Seems to be very little artillery use from the ships during this period. Yes, but there's very little... It's going to sound strange. I don't like the idea of calling medieval and dark ages those sort of scenarios, but I have to say, from a naval fighting perspective, most of the naval battles are very, very low-techy. But that's because it's a era of transition in many ways. You've got sails slowly coming in, galleys slowly going out, and they're working out what the range weapon is going to be on the sail ships, because it's not really the same instead of galleys. Donald Fritz. What World War II era, up to 2 years after, cruiser can put the most weight down range? Would it be Alaska or Des Moines or something else? Well, the thing is, you always have to remember that when you're looking at these ships, you're talking about the weight of the shell they're firing versus the rate of fire. So when you go the 8-inch to 14-inch guns, they're very, very lovely guns, but their rate of fire is nowhere near that of 6-inch. So you're probably looking at Brooklyn's, Cleveland's Town Class as your three options. It's got to be between them, as they're the 6-inch, which is the rate of which has the significant weight, but still has a significant rate of fire. So yeah, that's what I'd probably be looking at. Martin Doherty, I remember reading the Iron found a supply of leftover HE shells from World War I in mortar that was used to scare the Italians on the Libyan coast, but accounts reckon that the ball bearing eggs inside 15-inch shells had rusted solid, so not much use other than put the wind up you. Any truth to that, Doc? Okay. Now, the thing is, the Royal Navy was fairly obsessive with maintenance. So yes, they did have caches in Malta dating from World War One, but they had been stored in very good conditions and actually did work. The tradition, there is possibly one or two were problematic, but most of them were, their damage was inspected and they did work very well. Engaging strategy, word G. That you've got a full question down below, so I'll get to that in the question section. Tony Penfold, British and Commonwealth warships camo book arrived today. Fantastic book, great choice, thanks. Yes, they are cool. These books. Let's see. I'll get this one up. Yeah. That's got to be destroyers. So let's show you the cruisers. This is the cruiser one, which I haven't shown you all much of. I did bring it out for the C-class cruisers, and I'll bring it out for the D-class cruisers. But this is what HMS Aurelius gets up to. Come on, that's a cool-looking ship. And I always love the way the author's Malcolm Wright explains this stuff. Gives explanation for why they're in this camouflage, why they've got this paint scheme on, what's it's going on for, what they're doing with it. It's pretty cool. And there's HMS Sheffield, which looks dazzling. But this, of course, is how they looked on Imperial policing. Please note, the Great White Fleet was not the only ones who painted white. And yes, the Americans had the British colour scheme, because the British had it first. But ours was sort of a goldy funnel and a white ship. Which look pretty cool. In this case, you have HMS Birmingham, which also has a white ship, but has a silvery funnel because she's in a different squadron. Yeah. They took pride in their funnels. They're good books. Okay, where was I? Killer Binful, hello. Is it true the RNs DDs exchanged direct fire versus German panzers in 1940 defending Calais? I've heard accounts the RN DDs evacuating British troops exchanged direct fire with panzers 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s. They exchanged fire with them all. When they got too close and they got in range, they got fired at. There's disputes as to how much damage was caused and how accurate their shots were. The Germans claim nothing happened. The British claim they blew the things to smithereens. The reality is probably somewhere in between. Certainly quite a few of the soldiers, of the British soldiers ashore, and quite a few of the French civilians seem to think that the Germans have lost some tanks. Mainly, I would say a 4.7-inch gun, if it hits your tank, is not going to just ignore it. Lionheart X-Ray. What battleship fired its cannons the most in World War II? Yeeks. Probably Warspite. It's probably Warspite, but it could well be one of the Americans. Rob H. Would Rodney and Nelson have been more well-rounded ships if the British used their standard 15-inch? Yes, they would have been. Better. Far better ships. Sorry. Personal gripe here. Jeff Beeler, when do destroyers start being used extensively for short jump bombardment? Russo-Japanese War? No. Honestly, no. It's that they start being used properly for shore bombardment. Well, if you're talking about taking on pirates, etc., probably it's in 1920s. If you're talking about World War One, there are enough pre-dreadnoughts and cruisers and battleships going around that, frankly, no one's really using the destroyers for that. So, yeah, probably it's World War II when they start being used for it properly, so as we understand it. Although they did have some practice in the 1930s. Albert Zafsky. I think Des Moines class cruiser USN were designed to use auto-loading 6-inch AA guns. Yeah. But so everyone wants to design their 6-inch guns to AAs. Engaged strategy. Were the 18-inch pieces for the Glorious class large light cruisers and Lord Clive class models actually a good idea for naval gun support? Or was it simply overkill with a shell that was too unwieldy to fire fast? Bingo! You're taking a big shell and it's like one of those railway guns. You can fire it, boom, and then it either disintegrates your target or you have to fire another one, and it's going to take time, especially if you've just got a single gun. If it's a single barrel, it just basically 18-inch only works well when it's on Yamamoto, and even then, I'm not too sure I'm keen on it. I don't really think it's sensible. I think you stick with a 15-inch and go with a 6-inch for something else, or for everything else. Okay. In Happy, you mentioned in the intro the campaign along Nile. Was it also not a question of logistics, i.e. river charges carrying supplies? Yes, as I said, they were everything. They were your manoeuvre force, your logistics, your fire support. They were everything for that operation. Those gunboats were critical. In-car, pirates being hunted down by HMS Eagles aircraft. This was also 1920s 30s policy of RAF policing from the air in tribal areas in Iraq. Sold us cheaper than army patrolling. Yeah, it was, but both the Navy and the Army soon realised that soon troops had to turn up, and the RAF realised that soon as well. Which is why the RAF regiment actually probably owes its history to some armoured car units in the in Iraq. But we'll leave that to one side. Bale Inora. Lost sound. Turns out my family were getting you on the speaker in the kitchen. I hope they were enjoying it. Bruce Marino. Put another way, 936 shells in 10 minutes equals 1.56 shells per second. Presumably there were few after-action reports from receiving end. Thanks. That's pretty much the idea. You receive that many shells, you are not going to be having a good day. That's the sort of day which is not going to be a fun time. In-car, proximity fuses make a massive difference in AA effectiveness. True. Dave Benham, isn't that the reason the 5-inch mounts got better as AA is the proximity shell? Yes, as I said. Belmora, were the 4.5-inch on the Cold War counties made for bombardment? Yep. And like, or was it more for presence? Also, how they are ships, they don't seem a great design with magazine in some sea slug. Okay, so basically the counties are the Royal Navy again trying to build a sort of destroyer cruiser, giving it as many guns as it could, putting in sea slug, but it's a ship being built in a period of transition, and they're not sure how to build it. But actually, the counties are a fairly good design. They're a fairly stable ship. I'd say the real letdown in the Royal Navy destroyer design stable is the Type 42s, but I get into trouble when I say that. Mainly because I just look and I go, oh, we've produced such beautiful looking ships and such present ships, and then we produce them, which are perfectly serviceable. And when that's what you can say about a ship, that it's perfectly serviceable, then it's a problem. Back in a second, someone just calling me. Bang, back, right. Let's see, where are we? Okay. Killbone, is it true that RN's DDs exchange direct fire? I think I've answered that. And defendant, I think I've answered that one. Calvin Gasmond, weren't SAS taking out shore defences, except batteries at Falcons with land anti-tank missiles? Without that, naval gunfire support would have been trickier. Okay, so let's start on with that one. A, it's potentially the SAS, potentially the Mountain Arctic Warfare Cadre. B, they did fire them, and they actually managed to hit one ship, but you know, in the nicest way, it's the cost of doing business. You go out there, you take it on. You prefer not to lose ships, but the Royal Navy is going to risk the ships. The Royal Navy has the ships to fight a war. That's what they're there for. They're not there to be preserved. So, unfortunately, for historians like me who would like them to be preserved. So, it would have made things trickier, but, you know. I think also one of the systems was actually taken out by the SAS actually phoning in where it was, and a naval gun, ships going, boom, 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 and the launcher going, boo. Inappy, I always wondered whether mounting something like the US 12-inch coastal defense mortar on a hull would have made a good fire support ship if it had had HE shells. It could have done. If you can put a sufficient hull that's going to keep it stable, yeah. Strub, Doctor, how did Army Marines call for fire support and how long did it take? On D-Day, they were calling using radios, and it would depend on how quickly and who they were calling. They'd often be patched directly through to the ship, and if it was a destroyer, it would be very, very quick, because the destroyer would be just off the beach and would just literally go, guns, hello, bye-bye. But it takes slightly longer from ships further away from shore. But not that long. It would be, let's put it this way, it was never more than minutes, and usually sometimes can be seconds. Steam White, beach slope counts. Research a reason some atoll BBs stand off support best since anything else ground on reef, but deep waters wedge gets battleships very close, apart from mines. Yes. Basically, if you have a reef going out, it does depend on the sloping of the beaches. Why D-Day's done so much studies on those beaches to know where we can put the ships in. Okay. So, Martin says, would a cruiser design with a 6-inch and a pair of 15-inch been better for fire support? Probably not. I'd just go for all 6-inch. It makes life easier. In-car, how long would a BB battleship take to fully re-ammunition at base? depend how quickly they're prepared to do it. If they put the manpower, they can re-ammunition the ship in probably a couple of hours. Maybe slightly faster if they want to do, probably slightly longer. Gilbertful, your same question seems to come up quite a long time, but I think I've answered it. But it has come about 4 times. So if I haven't answered it, just put it. You haven't answered it in the next question. Trent Tanko, Dutch Clark, what are your thoughts on heavy mortars on small ships? The World War II USN LCM-IM and the Swedish 120mm on the Combat Boat 90 and the Swedish Navy. I think it's a good idea. I think, especially when you have these automated mortars, they are very useful for fire support. And I would love the Royal Navy to have some Combat Boat 90s, CB90s for the Royal Marines. And I would probably want them to have the mortars put on, because I think the mortars would be a very good weapon for them to be carrying. You know. Hi, Greg. I think I've said hi, but if I haven't, hi. SKR, since the Japanese used diving shells, yet they also wanted great battle ranges, wouldn't those ranges have a serious negative effect on the diving shell's angles? Yep. It does, but also, if you're aiming at sort of a really, let's put it this way, there is a certain perfect degree where you can get your maximum range. And the idea was that they would do that and they would dive into the water. That was the aim, and they would keep him, but I am not sure about it. It could theoretically have got a bit extra further distance out of it. Seamunt, outside Yuma, Arizona is a US Army firing range. At the gate stands 12-inch and a coastal 12-inch rounds. 12-inch railgun. Impressive seeing barrels from old Reynolds. Among your cool. Kevin Tank, what actually wore the guns out? The round, the pounder, or the recoil? Okay, the barrel would be worn out by the rounds, the friction, especially in a rifle barrel. The recoil would do the damage to the mount, and that would need to be checked every so often as well. David, by the way, Alaska's had 12-inch rifles. I called them 14 inches, didn't I, earlier? I do apologise. But still, 12-inch, it's still not going to be that much faster. You're getting into battleship range of weaponry. Vice Admiral Nelson. So, did the Kriegsmarine actually complete any meaningful shore bombardments in the Baltic? I mean, some German ships operated there, but do not recall whether they actually did noticeable damage. They did do some things. They did manage some stuff, but mainly the Baltic, when you're talking about fire support, is the Russians, especially later on in the war. General, Warspite only had 6 main guns operating on D-Day. Not a surprise to wear out her guns quickly. Yep. Donald Fritz, I read that a Fritz X hit a Brooklyn-class dead center. How did that not kill the ship when that bomb took out an Italian BB? Did the US have more armor on the top, or so it went a little straight? Well, okay. So A, it's partially damage control. B, it's where exactly it hits. And C, as with all these things, in the nicest way, there is advantages to having less armor because it can go through. It, you know, in the case of the Brooklyn class dead center, I think it hit it off to one side and the most explosion went out the other side. So she managed to keep going. But, you know, there's all sorts of stories. Tony Penfold, Cruisers. Excellent, that's my next book. Thanks. Book Addiction starting. Next I'll try and brew. Well, the interesting thing is, I have volumes 1 and 2 there, but I don't have volumes 1 and 3 there. I don't have volume 2 there or volume 4 there yet. Volume 2 and 4 are... I think volume 2 is on its way and volume 4 is with a student. Sure, Mac, am I the only one that doesn't like the Great White Fleet camo? I don't consider it camo, it's present status. When you paint a ship white, you're basically saying, come on if you think you're hard enough. I am here as a peaceful vessel. I am painted bright white. How can you consider me a threat? How can you be annoyed at me? Yes, I carry all these guns and all these missiles and all these weapons, but I'm painted bright white. You have to play nice, because I am painted bright white. That is what that ship is saying. Standpoint. The German Navy made some meaningful shore bombardments in the Baltic during the retreat in the Baltic states and East Prussia. Yeah, they did do something. Prince Eugen. Yeah, thank you, Standpoint. The pre-dreadnoughts Schleswig-Holstein and Schelsen, and the Panzer Chief Lutzel, also as well as a number of D-Day supported the German troops. They did do their best, but Baltic is one of those places which you think there'd be far more fighting than there actually was. In car, was there a design for a triple turret using RN's 15-inch guns? Yes, there was. David, no, Des Moines was a CA 8-inch guns. Richard Hughes, Shomak, be proud of being individualistic. Well, yeah, Sean should be proud of being individualistic. Ian Happy, what is your opinion on the Soviet World War II river tanks? They are cute, but I think there's a point about 1935, 1936, where you start to wonder with gunboats, because they can't get out of the way, whether or not they're a sensible choice. But they work for them, and they do work well for them. So you have to support it. See, I'm a second turret multiple middle gun, famous, but USS Mississippi blew out the second turret middle gun twice. Once in 1924 and once in 1944. Ouch. The RN did have a few turret accidents, but I don't think any were quite that bad. I don't think any resulted in 40 dead. Kevin Tank, did the Great White Fleet change its colour scheme for the Spanish-American War? I think so. Painted grey, as Bichon says. Yep. Donald Fritz, how come was friendly fire in a naval battle? One notable example is the US San Fran lighting up the US Atlanta with 8-inch point blank. Any other time something like that's happened? Oh, yeah, it happens. We don't like to talk about it, but it happens. It's a case of these things happen, and you have to be very careful about coordinating issues and working out where you are and what's going on. Famously, HMS Sheffield gets attacked by swordfish torpedo bombers when they're hunting for Bismarck. Although, in their defense, she had pretended to be a panzer chief when they'd been conducting an exercise a couple of years earlier to get away from them. So, they can be mistaken for thinking that she was a German. Stephanie Wilson, a white warship sends the same message as full dress uniforms. I am so in control that I can waste my time in fripperies. To an extent, yes. But honestly, a clean-looking, efficient ship is far more scary to everyone. It's impressive to people who aren't naval people, but it's also very impressive to sailors. It's why I worry when I see ships going out there with rust on them, etc. That's a sign for... That's when I start to worry about navies. When I see American ships going out with rust on them, when I see Royal Navy ships going out with rust on them, it doesn't look good. They need... it shows how much they're overworked in that way. Ooh. Kevin, the Great White Fleet named 1907-09, 10 years after the Spanish-American War, but yes, US ships were painted in grey before and after that time. Yeah, pretty much when they're on war duty, they're painted grey. But honestly, I was presuming that he meant when it came to First World War. Gordon Collins, how was World War II gunfire support called in? I.e. going through the stages from the troops that called in to the ship firing? What's the process? Well, you call up your brigade headquarters, which might well be on HMS Manxman. Remember, let's see, she was this one. That was very lucky. There you go, HMS Manxman, your bright red brigade command ship. And she would tell you a frequency. You go to that frequency, and you would have a destroyer or other ship waiting on the end going, "Hello, sir. How can we deal with your problem today?" Well, our problem is at this coordinate, and they appear to not be moving. Okay, don't worry. That will be dealt with. And then boom, boom, boom. It worked quite well. Sure, Mac. Like Tano, when the best I can say about your best carrier design is that it works. That's the Teo. When the best I can say is best carrier design is that it works. That's the problem, especially when your enemy spam. Yeah. Oh, the Essex class. Oh, they were so cool. They produced in such huge numbers. Constant drowsiness. What are the customs for gun salutes at sea when it comes to number of shots, especially between ships and shore batteries? Okay, it differs slightly between navies, but if you're actually firing a gun as a salute, that means it's someone pretty big these days. Usually you have a saluting gun that you actually can use for these circumstances, rather than having to fire the big 4.5 inch. It makes a lot of noise and a lot of smoke, but it doesn't do any damage. RA4, how often the Iron practice shore bombardment in the interwar period? Regularly. Part of most exercise periods would include firing shore targets. They had various firing ranges set up. Tobias G, hello. I enjoy these videos, but just want to check if all your students in your similar lectures saying, no, they don't. Nah, they don't. They mainly in those lectures are sitting there going, we're engineers. You're making us learn history. And I go, yes, so you have communication skills and actually understand the context. Jermac, riverine fire support is a whole nother big area of interest. Eastern Front in both World Wars and conflicts were full of these actions. Yes, I might do something special on that someday. Jeff Wheeler, I'm thinking V&Ws in the Baltic in 1990 with first major shore bombardment activities. And also destroyers engaged. Yes, well, destroyers get involved, but it's... Okay, so here's the thing. If your destroyer is doing a shore bombardment as a primary tool and actually dare to do the damage, that's it doing shore bombardment. If it's there as an also-ran, because cruisers are there, and the cruisers are the ones carrying the primary weapons, because at that time the destroyers don't really carry the weapons to do the damage, then I call it a bit iffy. And I would prefer to set it a bit later when I'm sure about it. But that usually provides my some of my thinking. Ian Carr, how did they re-ammunition with big shells? Use big hoists? Pretty much. It's a lot of hoists. It's a lot of information going back. It goes backwards and forwards. It goes backwards and forwards, and it's a lot of stuff going into them. And it has to be put in very carefully. And there are spaces which are designed to allow the shells in, so the shells can be carefully lowered into place and positioned correctly. And they have to be loaded in correctly because they have to be moved out quite quickly. So, you know, you have to do it very carefully. So anyway, reading Sea of Thunder by Evan Thomas, on and off begging for more armor piercing, but not enough time to replace his HE hair magazines. Yep. That doesn't surprise me. Fu was here. White hull, hello, and white hulls are functional too in the tropics. That's why white patterns remained into the 30s for tropical stations. They remained well into the 40s actually, some of them for tropical stations. In Happy. Correctly, the Brooklyn versus Fritz Savannah was hit in the forward magazines, but the Fritz X blew out the bottom of the ship in that place, so flooding everything before it could detonate. Well, that would certainly affect how it would issues. It's always context with these things. If you get hit, it's context of where you hit. You know, if you're Glamorgan and you're hit in the hangar, you lost your helicopter. You probably haven't lost your ship. If you were hit in the magazine with an exocet, okay, then you might have lost your ship. Juicy Shoe. Dr. Clark, could the British have banked the available 2 16-inch battleships rather than building Nelson Rodney, and would they have been better off waiting a decade to build them in the 30s? They couldn't really bank them. They weren't sure they would get to have them. But if they could have banked them and then built them in the 30s, yes, they would have been probably been better, but because they could have lied more, they would have lied more. But, you know, they built them then. Sean White, Wake Island, only incidents of seaborne invasion turned away. Famous movie showed actually with most delicate aiming instruments lost an air raid. Most guns sighted through open barrel. Stephen, I am. That's a probably. I'm sure that's a very good comment, but you lost me about halfway through. That could be because I've been marking today, though, so my brain might be a bit dead. Daniel Freeman, Great White Fleet colour scheme, a bit like Iron Commandos wearing berets, so they don't look aggressive when patrolling full battle rattle otherwise. Pretty much. Yes, we're armed to the teeth, but we're white. We're painted white. We're being peaceful. It's one of my reasons of laughing when I see the UN turn up. Dave Burnham, sorry for the clippers. Manus, could the Limbo mortars on Leanders be used for shore bombardment? Well, in theory you can. I don't think I've ever heard of them being used for that, but in theory I don't see why they're a mortar. You probably have to make sure the mortar rounds were set to impact explosive, but, you know, yeah, probably. Thomas Rottweiler, swordfish pilots should have been able to see the difference between Sheffield and Bismarck. They're part of age. They should have been, but they didn't. Occasionally, you know, these things happen. It was in the light was at its worst point. Okay, the 2 points when light is at its worst isn't the dark pitch black. It's when it's either just rising or just falling down, because that's when there's the most difficulty adjusting your eyes. So, you know, that's what we'll say. It's for that. Dave Benham, were there naval forward artillery observers in amphibious operations in World War II? Yes, there were. In Happy, I've read that Omaha Beach, the few tanks that got ashore fired at German positions. Destroyer captains that went in and used the tanks of fire as aim points for their fire. A myth? No, they did use German tanks firing as aiming points, and especially in bunkers. Okay, just to clarify about the forward observers, you had the two methods of calling in for fire support. You radio up your brigade gives you the signal. Or if you were lucky enough to have one of the naval gunfire observers with you who had a direct line to a ship, you basically went to them and, please, bring me heaven. And they would go, no, but we can make it rain fire. And that would be enough. In Happy, I've Daniel Freeman and Dr. Naval Gunfire Support. Hello, this is the Bangs Are Us. Yes, can I order some takeaways? 6 engine gunners and lyric to gunners. Yep, that pretty much works. Trent Telenke, this is a good article on the US and friendly fire in World War II. Friendly fire instance World War II naval operations. Oh, cool. That looks like a good article. Paul Johnson, is it true that armor-piercing shells are no longer carried by the RN? Well, they mostly carry high explosive, but I think they probably do carry a few armor-piercing, but just not as many of them. I've read various topics over the year, reports over the years which say yes and no. And my sinking suspicion is they probably do a few, but not many. Because they haven't really managed to have to use them. And also, when you're dealing with modern warships, do you need armor piercing? Joseph Creek, what is your opinion on the US use of aluminium in the warship construction? Well, my dad, the naval architect, would tell you that if you did it properly, and if you coated it properly and looked after it properly, aluminium was perfectly fine in warship construction. If you took shortcuts and you were dealing with the first generation of aluminium warship construction, that was not really a good idea. So that explains the Type 21s and the LCS. Asan, what would the ideal shore support ship look like from an interwar RN perspective, and did they ever achieve such a design? Pretty much it would have either been a Monitor or a Town-class cruiser, and they had both of those. Sorry, we had poor connection for a second. Alright. Kevin Taggart, how did pilots train for night flying? Did they have night vision goggles? No, and it was hopeful there's a moonlit night and they can see their way. That was it, pretty much. They had dials which glowed in the dark as well. Jeff Beeler, 4.5-inch rounds, much cheaper and more accurate than Limbo rounds. Yes, that's the more problematic, more realistic solution. Dave Burnham, you should do a presentation on misidentification of ships by airmen. That would be quite cool. Stromach, I have a theory as to why Spruance never declined like a lot of other officers. Well, let's hear your theory. Jay Richardson, aluminium armor, Pentagon war intensifies. I've caught up. Goodness gracious me, I've caught up with the questions. During action, this Navy relearns lessons. No wooden furniture to burn, no linoleum floors, quick release slide for arse and floors. Yep, that sounds all good. What handled shore bombardment in Suez in 1956? It was cruisers and it was destroyers, and they were doing a lot. And the daring class destroyers got up to a fair bit. I'm actually going to be disappear for a second. I'll be back in a second. But as you notice, I'm now on water and out of Iron Brew. And as I've caught up with questions, I'm going to treat myself to grabbing some Iron Brew as basically a treat to myself for having caught up with the questions so quickly. Back in a second. Thank you. Right. So, during actions, navies relearn lessons. No wooden furniture to burn, no linen on the floors. Yeah, they always relearn lessons. Tony Penfold, if guns are coming back, does that mean armour, especially modern composite armour, will also return? Well, that's the interesting thing. You see, my looking at modern ships, especially the things like the Zumwalt class, which I see as a sort of bit of a future forebear of what ships are going to look like in a sort of a generation or so's time. They have got. They're going to have some more composite sort of armour. They already do have some pretty thick steel around certain things, and you know, be quite sort of useful for them. Nighthand Productions. How does say 1 inch of modern day armour compared to World War II era 1 inch armour in terms of stopping power and quality? It's probably about 20 to 30% better. Probably. GC Fusion, Dr. Clark. On the bilge pumps, SSKs were described as the modern equivalent of coastal defence BBs or minefields. If so, do you think countries like Japan will go SSNs? I think Japan, because of their stance on nuclear power, will probably stick with SSKs. They might go gas. They might go gas, but I think they'll stick with SSKs. Dave Brennan, when you visit HMCS Haida, check out all the woodwork in the wardroom. I will do. In fact, when I visit HMCS Haida, I am going to be sitting in the captain's chair and going, she's mine now. I'm taking her home with me. Jameth, would the RN be better off with semi-armor piercing shells now as they give you the best of both worlds? Probably not, because you need mostly high explosive for most of the jobs you're going to do. And frankly, you can pack more high explosive in a high explosive than you can in semi-armor. Martin, I saw that. And, well, hello. Decision. I miss Haida. Haven't been to it since I went to Ontario. I went to Ontario in a place when I was 11 or so. Oof, that's a long time ago. Well, no, that can't be too long ago. You're only, what, 12? 15? No. But no, it's always too long to go. These things are worth visiting. Jeffy, look. Guns never really went away for the most part. Just a few ships totally... a few ships towed guns. Even Ikara and Exocet leaders had a brace of 40mm Bofors. Yes. Yes, they had a brace of 40mm Bofors, which was helpful. Frankly, the 40mm Bofors again proved to be some of the most effective weapons in the Falklands War. Okay, Ian Carr, can you give more detail on the Iron 15-inch triple turret design, when it was designed, and why it was not proceeded with? It was first designed in case of towards the end of the First World War, and the first generation was for Rodney. It was then evolved into a next generation of it for Rodney and Nelson. They didn't take it. They went with the 16-inch gun design. They basically modified the turret up, and then it was petered around during the interwar years as an idea for an upgrade to the Queen Elizabeth class and the R classes. Give them all give them a third gun in every single turret. Yeah, just what would make everyone happy. HMS Warspite, now with added 50-inch guns. And then they looked at it again for the King George V class. So basically it was running around for about 30-odd years. And then they also looked at it for the Vanguard, and they also went with doubles again. Someone got obsessed with doubles, unfortunately. They got obsessed with multiples of 2. And sure, Matt. Basically, it was because he never... I can agree with that, actually. Spruance was very good at avoiding this stuff. If it was here, the correct answer is probably, I don't know, to the loud-out question. Nevweeps don't list any AP for the 4.5-inch Mark 8 guns. The HE fuse can be set to the post-impact modes for surface fire. Yes, but Naveweps and I have a question sometimes. I also have a feeling, in the nicest way, I've spent enough time studying the Royal Navy and around the Royal Navy to know that they are the organizational equivalent of the person who... they're the organizational equivalent of a hoarder. There is so much stored for just another day. Just in case we might need it. Just in case we might need it. Just in case we might need it. There is so much stuff stored. And it's really useful. It always turns out to be useful stuff, i.e. Falklands War, etc. Suddenly the stuff appears and you go, where was it? Oh, we had it in a warehouse. It's like there's a whole load of technically inoperable Harriers sitting in down at Calderose, which is the naval base in Cornwall, which you can actually see when you drive past, and therefore the flight deck training school. Rabbit Raceback, I can't read the intro to your book yet, so I don't know the premise of your book. That being said, what would you consider the American counterparts of the tribal daring battles? Fletchers, Fletchers, and Fletchers. Really, it's the Fletchers for quite a while, because then they go into all sorts of weird stuff with nuclear ships, and they don't really build a presence, you know, destroyer. And let's be honest, the presence of a battle class destroyer was... Let's see, where I got the... oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. That's it, isn't it? That's the battle. Yeah, that's the battles. Okay, so a battle class destroyer is the one produced during World War II. And if I show you this picture, they basically look like their guns are so keen to start firing at you, they're actually pulling the ship apart. They're actually stretching their own ship. The guns are so keen to start shooting you. And that was the whole thing. When the Royal Navy was building the Tribals and the Darings, they wanted a ship which was presence for presence. The battles were presence for intimidation. Fletchers, Summers, and Gearings. Yeah, go on. But no, I'm not sure. You see, the Gearings, I'm not sure I consider them presence ships, really. But yeah, we'll go with them. But it's building a destroyer which can have presence. That's the thing. Another riverine topic. Yangtze River Patrol, USA and RN. Insect River gun types on the Yangtze. Yeah, that's good. So note to self, buy more shares in Iron Brew. If you drink it, you buy it. Jerison, most modern ships are all or nothing these days, or at least the Kirov is. No, they're not as all or nothing as they might try. Some people might believe. Jay and Carl, did the RN have no concerns about flammable rum ration? Well, let's be honest, the nicest way to get to the rum ration, you have to get through all the sailors. The rum ration was protected. Jerison, most modern ship Happy. Was mounting BB battleship guns on Monitors in Model 2 in the end not more of an effort to outrage the German 11-inch and later 15-inch outrange the German 11-inch and later 15-inch coast batteries, rather than these guns being optimal for coastal bombardment? It was probably something to do with that, but, you know, honestly, we were going to be charging into their range anyway. In Rapid Razorback, you have to get close, but how well would modern armor handle a 16-inch shell? There is nothing built to take a 16-inch shell at the moment. I mean, maybe an American supercarrier could take it, but honestly, I wouldn't want to be in a supercarrier after the 16-inch shell had hit. Especially if it managed to go anywhere near their power plants. Austin Harmon, did we just witness the naval historian equivalent of reloading a magazine, or is getting iron brew more like refueling? Both equally important. It's celebrate good times. Are we going to get into Vietnam Wars, Brown Water Navy? We can do. That was a cool stuff. I especially liked, if you saw the recent Grand Tour episode where they were on boats. The fact that Jeremy Clarkson has rebuilt a PBY has given me and Drac both hope for building our own, in Drac's case, HDS Thunderchild, and in my case, HCS is the HCS Super Tribal. Yeah. Right then. Steve White. USN cruisers survived massive 24-inch torpedoes hits. Bows taken right off after the magazine forward. Yeah. These ships are built to survive. You always have to remember that. They are built to survive. They will take a lot of a pounding. And they will keep fighting. They will keep fighting. Everyone's now worried what a super tribal will be. Thank you again to my lovely girlfriend and family who sent this to me. It's very, very nice. Svung, okay, on SSKs, should RN build a new class of SSKs? I would like some. Built in addition to the nuclear submarines, I think they would be good force multipliers. I don't think we're going to get enough force multipliers. Oh, Kevin Tagger, I missed the question, didn't I? Do subs have a keel? No, they have a sail. It's going to sound really strange, but as I've always understood it, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, the sail on a submarine, it fulfills a similar function to what the keel does on a ship, but it's it's on the top. But basically, that is how they sort of keep themselves orientated in the water. That's quite cool. They do have internal framing and stuff like keels, but they're like the internal stuff of a keel, but it's all round. Jeff Beeler thinks Japan will build bigger air-independent SSKs. Yes, definitely politically more sound. Steam White, Harry bombers used 40mm anti-tank guns, both or others. They were Vickers, weren't they? I think they were Vickers. Jeff Beeler, you need to get hired by McMaster University so you can live next to Haida. That would be lovely. I can teach historians or engineers. I actually technically prefer teaching historians because they understand the phrase context from the get-go. But I don't mind teaching engineers. I don't mind who I teach, actually. I like all students. Most students I get on with quite well. I tend to keep quite good control of my classes. Minor Sims, what is your view on the 40mm and 57mm being fitted to Type 31, and would they have any use in fire support? Well, I did sort of cover this earlier, but I think 57, if I was going to be fitting them, I'd be fitting doubles. 2 double 40s and 2 double 57s. But they're going with singles. And they can do fire support, theoretically, but they're mainly for they're the sloop equivalents. The 57mm is the equivalent of the 4-inch gun on a sloop. They'd be quite effective, but honestly, they're not going to be as effective as a 4.5 inch anymore, or that sort of thing, in terms of that sort of firepower. They are going to be effective in terms of relative to themselves. So let's be honest, if you've got an APC or anything like that on the beach, it should probably go hide. Kevin Tag, random question. Can a sub do a barrel roll? I don't really think so, but I'd volunteer to be on the crew if they were going to give it a try. Jeff B, the RM will stick with SSNs because they're building SSGNs too. They're building SSBNs, the ballistic missile subs. GNs are the cruise missile ones. We'd like some GNs. The only reason I picked this up is I would like some GNs for the Royal Navy because we are short first day strike power. D1 strike power is problematic. Someone keeps writing in Arabic script. I read many things, but Arabic script I do not. I'm sorry, so it has to be in English. If it was Russian, I could be trying to work it out. I can read Russian, sort of. Especially technical documents. Incar, according to British Pathé, there were 400 ships in our reserves in 1950. Where were significant numbers docked and cocooned, and are there any ships in current reserve? There are no ships currently in reserve. That's one of the most silly things we did after the East of Suez decision, was get rid of the reserve fleet, because everything was based around a nuclear war, going nuclear very quickly, and no time for reserves to get into service, when in fact actually the odds are that it would be time for reserves to get into service. They were mostly escorts, they were mostly things like River class, various types of destroyer, those sort of things were mostly, and they were mostly not really cocooned, but they were put into various ports around the country. Take care, RF4. Thank you for being here. Donna Fritz, how did bathrooms work on early subs and smaller ships or warships? Kind of assume they would give it a lot of tonnage to the toilets. Actually, you'd be surprised that Heads does get its fair share, because it's apart from cleanliness, and keeping the ship clean, keeping the crew healthy is important for keeping the ship working. It's one of the things I point out when you're talking about in the Royal Navy in the 18th and 19th centuries and living on them versus living ashore. Living on a ship was often a far cleaner space to living in, because it was kept incredibly clean. Because it had to be, to try and keep the crew healthy, because they were in such confined spaces. Barely Amora, was there a good reason to abolish the rum ration, or was it political imposition? It's mostly politics. Saves a little bit of money, but it's good. It looks good politics. Sean Mack, did you read my theory? Yes. Yes, it does. Basically, I did like your theory on, and I think I said I liked your theory on Spruance and why he kept going. It's a good idea, you know. In the nicest way, he does avoid politics and he does keep going. Angus Thomas, please do not fire your 16 shell at the nuclear reactor or the supercarrier. Yeah, that's pretty much my idea. Now Jay Richardson is having a whole conversation apparently in Arabic, so, you know. I'm not sure what's going on here. Iron brew ration or rum ration? I'm a brew ration. Bad Home, super tribal. Ah, well, you see, Super Tribal is a very, very special thing. I will explain it someday. Swiss World War II idea, Navy. That could be interesting to talk about. Austin Hammond, I'm now both concerned and overjoyed at the idea of the Super Tribal. Well, you see, there was an idea for a slightly bigger tribal, and the original plan for the L class. Chris Martin, will your book on tribals, battles, and darings be available on Kindle? I have no idea. I hope so. No, my idea for a super tribal is the L class design with the 4.5-inch guns, which they eventually put in the battles, but the original Henderson plan of 4 of them. So it had 8 4.5-inch guns, which were of course dual purpose for AA and anti-ship, and it carried 2 quintuple torpedo launchers and displacing at about 2,500 tons. Yep. Rabid Razorback, do you think guns are unappreciated today? If you wanted to build a modern shore bombardment ship, what would it look like? Pony. Probably have a few. If I was building a modern one with current generation tech available, probably would be a couple of double 4.5-inch guns or 5-inch guns mounted on the front. Something like the Zumwalt class, but with more actual guns per mount. Jeff Beeler, China built a replica battleship. Why not a replica tribal? Bingo. But mine's going to be a super tribal. Dana Freeman, re-torpedo hits on battles. Regarding loss of HMS Prince Wales, it was at least in part shearing from angled hub above explosion, lifting the hull, but weight of turret. It was all sorts of bad things were going on for HMS Prince Wales. Rapid Razorback, I miss the Upholder class. We all do. They're the Victoria class now. The Canadians have them. Night Heron production, USS Albacore, teardrop hull, had a rudder installed on the sail conning tower to counter snap rolls. Yes, she did. Donna Fritz, any chance of the super speedy hydrofoil designs of the USN 9070s come back? Basically, speed was put in when HMS King George V is just singing HMS Hood constantly now. Trouble is with speed is it's great as long as you can outrun your opponents. Once you can't outrun them, then there's no point in it, and that's the trouble. A missile can always run faster than you, even though you're on a hydrofoil. In Happy, I love the Spanish floating batteries used at the Great Siege of Gibraltar. They were pretty cool, although ultimately ineffective, but they were pretty cool. Albertowski, is 40mm Bofors or 57mm 6-pounder useful as a shore bombardment weapon? It is useful if you're a riverine sort of operations. If you're a big ship, King George V, I do like your singing, but I think we all heard HMS Hood enough for today. But it was nice singing when it lasted. I think it was technically HMS Hood, HMS Hood, HMS Hood. Technically. The plan of HMS Hood's modernization I will get into in a second. I'm just working through these ones, but I will get that. The thing is, if you've got a ship which is weighing in at around about 7,000, 8,000 tons, a 57mm for your fire support seems a little tame. Back in a second. It's been called. Right then, so let's see. Barrel roll is sub is not conducive to sub survival. No, it isn't. T31E should really bound home. T31E should really have had a 5-inch. I would have. If you could double up the guns, then it would work. No, decision. You're not getting upholders for astutes for upholders. Right then. More investments from Osprey in the critical resupply fund. You are far too generous. Thank you very much, Mr. Osprey. Let's see, or Osprey. Tony Penhall should have done a deal with the Japanese, help with 6th generation aircraft for SSKs. That would have been quite cool. Any constant drowsiness. Any reading suggestions for learning about HMS Whitney, a river class frigate? A river class frigate. Well, actually, there you go. Brian Lavery's book, River Class Frigates and the Battle of the Atlantic, A Technical and Social History. So this one. That would answer your question on that one. And I think Waverley isn't mentioned in here. Yeah. It's just the sort of the one. It'd be between this book and this one. Wright's British and Commonwealth Warship Camouflage World War II. These two would be the two things for that one. For river class frigates. Hi, Pat. Calvin Gasman, sub keels. In Das Boot, they dropped the keel when no other means seemed to have moved the sub stuck on the seabed. But that's World War II in a movie series. Yeah, we're going to leave that one to one side. Ooh. Vision, did the Town class HMS Birmingham have a wheelhouse in post 1952 refit? Yes, I think she did. I have that plan, that book. Sorry, you're not. Don't mind. Yeah. British warships, cruise Birmingham. Yeah. Right then, let's see. 1952, you say? So I go to 1952. This is one of the interesting things. When you ask me these questions, I do tend to have these books. Which is cool, was good. Ah, yes. Forecastle deck stations. I think it might have been moved. Yeah. I think it was moved. Yes, it was moved. It is in there. But it was moved. Right. That one goes that one. That one. Oh, I didn't realise you could all go back that far. I can have lots of fun with you guys now. Right. See, Mike, thanks for the 40 million info. Tried to patch up my iron knowledge. Big surgery ring. Yeah, you'll get through it. 10 years, just keep reading fast. And, you know, watch lots of videos. Drax always good. I try to be good and informative, but Drac is very, very good on the technical stuff. Probably scares some of my academic colleagues with his skills on that front. Could Ian Carr, could all the crew have rum, including the fire control team? Yes, everyone could have rum. Neon Tetra 4, where would you serve during World War II if you had to choose any post? Give me a Trevor Class Destroyer as her captain and just leave me be. I'd be very, very happy at that front, and then just let me just go find the enemy. I'll be very happy. Drop keels were sort of an interesting scenario when you put them in. Basically, the idea is you have something which pops out and gives you the keel. And it's specifically if your sub is designed for surface operation quite regularly, it would be something that could be fitted in. But it depends, how often do you think your sub's going to be on the surface, how much of the time it's going to be motoring away on the surface, and can you not put in other things which could provide coverage for it in that case, in that scenario, which would work just as well without it. For example, could you extend the fins at the back and these sort of things. Now reaching the hood singing section. Paul Johnson, what do you think of the super cruiser with 9.2-inch guns? Was it a waste of time? It wasn't a waste of time. I could see where they were going, but I doubt they would actually gone there. I think they'd have probably stuck with the 8-inch if they had been maybe just gone 6-inch. In Happy, do you think modern warships should be built with the capacity for later upgrades and not trying to get as much bang per damage as possible from the start? Yes, to an extent. I think they need to be built viable. But there's things like, if I'd been doing the Zumwalt class, I'd have gone, I'm getting in a round down, I'm getting in a tumble down bow, I'm getting in all sorts of things. I will build the capacity for the rail guns, but they're the bits which are going to take the longest. So I will have an existing gun system, a simple gun system, to go in to go there. HMS King George V. Do you like the look of HMS Hood's planned modernization? Yes, it did look fairly good. The ideas they were talking about. Me and Drac have been discussing this because Drac's doing a whole special on it, I think. I don't think I'm announcing anything new when I say that. And Jamie and I were having a nice long conversation on it, and it's an interesting topic to look at. Rapid Razorback, can you or Drac please do a video on the sinking of Prince of Wales and Repulse? Prince of Wales and Repulse. I'm sure we'll get around to that. Jerison, come cheer me up, lads. Right then. There's some good singing going on here. I shouldn't have mentioned sea shanties earlier, but if you're interested in sea shanties, go and look up. I think it's Kelsey Power's work on global maritime history. She's done all sorts of stuff on the history of them. I think it's Kelsey. I might be wrong though. I do get my colleagues sometimes confused because I've never really met them. I met some of the colleagues from global maritime history I've only ever met once or haven't at all, and I get them confused because of it. It's terrible. Raisback, Ardeberg versus Tigronga. I think the cruisers were a better deal. Ticos are overstressed destroyer hulls. They're not really cruisers. They're destroyers with nuclear power, so they're called cruisers. But really, if they've been going to be cruisers, they should have been about an extra 5,000 tons on that. HMS King George V. Well, I'm Dr. Alex Clark. I'm a naval historian, and I'm here to chat. And I'm just always happy to have people chatting away. Oh. Carbon gas mode, hydrofoils, almost, Skuld and Norway and border Russia. Yes, there is. Let's put it this way. I think semi-planing is probably going to be there because it's nice to have the speed, but the expense of going for full planing and the difficulty of it is problematic. Mesh, how many crew were saved when moving to oil firing from coal in a destroyer cruiser battleship? A lot. You could almost cut the crew by a third in some cases, changing from oil to from coal to oil, because moving coal around, it's not just the coal in terms of actually doing. Take care, Thomas. It's not just in terms of putting the coal into the into the boilers and sort of making the fires and making the actually using heat. It's also in terms of coal in the ship, moving the coal around the ship. It's incredibly difficult and incredibly labor intensive. Let's see. Donald Robinson, best source please for HMS Manxman. Also, is there scope for a specific type like that now? For Manxman, there is actually a book on the Manxman class and deal on the Manxman classes, which is very good. As for a specific type like that now, I'm not sure if you want a mine-laying ship. You can do it far easier with aircraft, dropping the mines and various other things like that. You probably wouldn't go for it. But it's an interesting idea. Okay. Oddly, Stephen White, CSS at Hunley had a keel drop for emergency servicing. Large screw nuts released, but at least one crew died before they could release. Bad Hunt. Admit it, you want to sail the Trouble so that you could claim that it had sunk and keep it after the war. No comment. Carl Gasberg, that would be a better plan. Prize money and then buy out the Trouble. Forward here. No, the drop keels and early submarines were for emergency ascents to get some positive momentum buoyancy. They are removed from designs as the size needed to go too large and subscrew in size. The use case was martial enemy. Yes, I know. Okay, so drop keels, and I was probably confusing them with the other type of keel. So drop keels are they drop off to get up. But some of them have deployable keels, which I was confusing with, and I do apologise. So they could maintain higher surface speed, so they could drop them down to get a higher surface speed when they are at when they're going on at sea. It all makes problems with the hull. It's all problematic, and frankly, it's not something you should really do. So they don't last that long. Ian Carr, would a rebuilt hood have been submersible? Hopefully not. Hopefully they might have fixed it so that she could actually not have all the water planing over her when she was going at high speed. Okay, Steve White, story of US Arizona, Madeline Black, a story about stowaway for 5 weeks, hitching ride to Hollywood from New York City. Young Oscars get reminded for this. Arlie Burke, reverse later. Interesting. Would be an interesting movie. Martin Doherty, can you possibly see a return of cruisers to the Iron like Tigers class for Naval Gunfire support and command facilities? I know the Daring class are roughly the size, same size as World War II cruiser. I could see that size of ship, and I do have to say I do like Drax. Honestly, not a battle cruiser, sir. Idea, but I don't think it would be called a cruiser. I think if it would be good if it was called a cruiser, but I doubt it would be. I could see that size of ship though coming back for fire support, command, and probably some other general post duties. Rapid raceback, nuclear powered destroyers to allow for laser railguns and coil guns. That's one way of getting around the power issues. Certainly, that is one way of getting around the power issues. Donald Fritz. Any chance we will see USN or NATO nuclear cruisers like Virginia-class nuclear-propelled guided missile cruisers? Potentially. As I said, it's one of the ways to solve the railgun issues. Because the big problem with the railgun is not the gun, it's the power supply. You can get the gun working if you have sufficient power and able to maintain sufficient power. And the thing is, you need batteries, you need a constant power supply. Nuclear power is probably the only option. But they're working on it. Rapid raceback, all safer, no dust or explosion risk. No, that is a good advantage. Self-ignition packed in coal boxes either. That was actually rare. In fact, coal was often used as armour. As extra armour in some of the early ships, because it was quite so stable. I think the trouble is, Carl, is that how far back would you have to be to keep anything out of the line of fire these days? That's becoming a question. Agisa, which historical figure would you most like to speak with, interview, dead or alive? Well, I'll put in nicest way, I'll say barring Admiral Henderson, the third Sea Lord in the 1930s. I would probably pick Admiral Duncan from the Battle of Camperdown, because he was a really, really good admiral, and he doesn't deserve the fact that history doesn't really remember him. Jermac, if I'm not mistaken, new finished corvettes, very small frigate size, will have space under deck for mines. That wouldn't surprise me. For the Finnish, I could understand it. Tony Penfold, video idea. Atlantic submarine attack groups, commanders and tactics. Ooh, that could be fun. Ian Carr, how many bows do you plan on building for your travel? I'm hoping only once for my super travel. I might double bow it just in case. Rapid raceback. Tico's were conventionally powered. Yes, they were. I did say nuclear powered, but no, they are basically stretched destroyers, and no. They're designed to be fast enough to keep up with the nuclear carrier. Let me check. Yeah. But they were designed to be able to keep up with nuclear carrier, and they're stretched destroyer hulls. They are really... They're not cruisers. I said if they hadn't been stretched and all those things, they wouldn't have been. I did call them nuclear powered, but I was confusing them with the my favourite one of the Long Beach. Long Beach and Virginia class were pretty cool. Yeah. Nuclear power cruisers were a good idea for the US Navy. Getting rid of them was silly. Pardon me. Juicy student, Leanders, Leander cruisers, Toyota Corolla of cruiser designs. Not fancy, just plain worked. I would go for the Toyota Hilux pickup, but yeah. Paul Johnson, do you think Hood would have been preserved if she did survive war? Well, seeing as Warspite wasn't, I don't think Hood would have been. Danny Freeman, oil was used for torpedo production and is still used as protection in tanks. It is. Because, again, the ignition and temperature of it. Kevin Tank, do you think once the power is sold, do you think we could see multiple turrets come back and return to Yamamoto-sized ships? Possibly multiple turrets. Well, quite definitely probably multiple turrets. Even the Zumwalt's already got multiple turrets. Multiple gun turrets, probably. Not sure if Yamamoto-sized. Not sure about that. Donna Fritz, what happens when a nuclear-powered ship is attacked with a bomb and such? I assume an ecological disaster. Let's put it this way. You have to put in various functions to try and protect it. Richard Hughes, you also need 2 barrels just in case. Yeah, I'm just thinking that was my idea. Pat Briggs for it. Esperance class DD transformed into Kid class DDG, then the Ticos. The US Navy got its money out of that design. It did, but the trouble is it didn't really fit. Don Rawson, has all or nothing armor on warships just become nothing? Depends who you're talking to. Martin Dorothy, I know we have the T-31 coming on stream with maybe 3 guns, but what is your thoughts on equipping them with 3-inch guns? Similar to what was on the Tide class in the 60s. Rate of fire was fantastic. You see, the 3-inch, the 76mm, as we call it these days, more often than not these days, doesn't really offer that many advantages over the 57mm when you're talking about it in terms of the system it's coming along with. And the 57mm will be able to carry more rounds. I would prefer a double 57mm mount and 2 double 40mm into mounts, but currently it's got singles of all them. But you know, 3-inch guns were good, but Rabid Razorback, FFGX is the only real opportunity. That and next generation large escort, whatever they're going to be calling it now. Ian Carr, believe no RN nuclear subs have been scrapped to date and are at party pool. They're mostly in Portsmouth. I think some might be in. They're basically stored around various naval bases. Kent, why not 2 sterns as well? Everyone says the bow, but no one mentions the lowly stern. The stern can also suffer damage. I think it was... What's it, Ashanti or Nubian which lost a stern? One of them did. Nubian during Crete. Steve White, dream of mine is a national or world war gaming convention for teams. A lot of tanks and ships need to rethink the commercial aspects of the old style on the floor games. Could be interesting. Nubian didn't sink, Daniel Freeman. Nubians didn't sink. A few did, others didn't. It depends if they can manage to, if they retain control of their power supply. Osprey 28. Never leave a defense contractor alone with a PowerPoint. No. No, do not. Carmen Gaspo, 76mm versus 57mm. Since guided shells are becoming a reality 57mm, and as well as the cheapest smart element, it settles the issue. Yeah. Which decision? A stern with a full load of depth charges has plenty of junk in. Yeah, there's plenty of stuff which can go off in the stern. Mitchell Oates got to tour HMS Conqueror at Charleston in 1980 before Falcons War. Was whatever became of the old girl, she's still sitting in harbour waiting to meet her end. She's still sitting there. Let me see. I think there's a picture of her. I can probably track it down. Yep, Conqueror, as of April 29 in 2019, is one of 20 submarines still being stored by the Ministry of Defence, awaiting for disposal. And I have a picture of her from 2006 next to HMS Warspite, I think. King George is singing, 5th is singing HMS Hood again. There you go. So she's sitting there. Bear, what are some other examples that are similar to the Athenian victory at Pylos? Well. So, there are people who are not sure who King George V is. I'm half tempted to think it might be Drac, but we'll leave that to one side. As for the victory at Pylos, you've got a few good ones. Okay, sorry, I was distracted by the very nice Paul Johnson, who sent through the book on the Ideal class with the ISBN numbers there. So, you have, when you're talking about quite a lot of these battles, when you're talking about the things that are going on in terms of galley warfare, you have to remember galley warfare and land warfare tend to fit into each other in the same things. They tend to be very much about the infantry and the boarding troops and how they're working, and it is quite a sort of quite a thing in terms of, you've got Pylos. Other battles in the war are pretty cool. I've got my list of battles here so I don't get them wrong. You've got, I think it's Amphibia. No. The most important one, from my memory, And I'm just checking this because it could just be... See, there's a battle which is actually called Amphibiolis. And... yeah. Amphibiolis is... and it's where I consider the root of amphibious warfare. Amphibiolis, because of the battle that takes place. And that's one to look at. Battle of Amphibiolis. In Happy, did other countries have a gun pool similar to the British 15-inch gun pool, and did the British have it for other guns too? Yes. It's how you maintained your guns and how you kept them going. Austin Harmon, at this point I'm about to call the spirit of HMS Warfright to settle the singing. Maybe let in, you know, things. Possible. A tribal escort in on it as well. That would certainly be interesting. Martin Norrie, always wondered what the result would have been during the great Anglo-US war that never happened, with the Grand Fleet sailing forth to the eastern seaboard to take on the Yanks. It could certainly have been interesting. I think the US Navy could have found that the Royal Navy were definitely not the foes they were expecting. Rapid Razorback, where can I find your Discord and Bilge Pumps podcast? Bilge Pumps is on... Bilge Pumps is on SimSec website. And so that's on SimSec. And the Discord, which we'll see. Discord, you can find a link, will appear in the chat now. Right. Brock Payne, if we're talking Athenian naming, people ought to read up more on the Battle of Naputus. Now, 20 Athenians versus 77 Spartans. Guess who won? Probably the Athenians when it comes to namies. In Happy, destroyer equivalent in the Age of Galleys, delivery? Possibly. See, Mike, greatest ancient innovation naval-wise was the mass production facility at Carthage, sort of interchange of common parts to produce uniform fleet. Theoretically, yes, theoretically they did work quite well. Paul Johnson, how much does a new 4.5-inch barrel cost? Okay, so cost for these things is always one of those areas where they don't really reveal full details, or it's all sort of breaking up and hidden. But I think it's definitely in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands of pounds for a new barrel. Reconditioning is the way they prefer to go. Right then. Do you have a biography of published articles? Cannot find any on our uni catalogue. Bibliography of published articles, uni articles. They're mostly on academia.edu and they're on Global Maritime History. That's where you can usually find them. Right. All right. Austin Hammond, praise be, my case of iron brew was just delivered. That's good for you. It's good. Brock Payne. And took us. The Spartans captured 9 to 20 amphibian ships. Then a Spartan ship ran aground. The Athenians counterattacked, retook all but one of their ships, and the Spartans felt like, yeah, well, it happens occasionally. Spartans don't really like water. They're good on land where they can control things. Jerison, Corinth is such an underrated city-state. Its army was possibly the best mix of quality, quantity, but its technological edge in industry is possibly its greatest strength. It was a good middle-of-the-road one, definitely. So come to USA like Japanese, reasoning the distance weakens any attacking force. So, matter of increasing the percentage during their advance. Outer Banks, imagine warm Scarpa flow times 10, and that, and Canada. Brock Payne and Thebes, they smashed the Smart Army a few times. They did. Richard Hughes, thanks, Dr. Clark. Congrats on meeting your first troll. Oh, King George V isn't really a troll. Just singing. Honestly, if you are, if that's what trolling's about, then it's rather funny. Brock Payne, Angrosians had even more elite troops than Sparta. That's debatable, but probably, so to an extent. Spartans have very good PR, as Daniel Freeman's just pointed out, and they're much better. They managed to get the really cool story, and that works. Yeah. Right? It's one of those things. If you can get a good story, it can work. Look, trolling, or whatever KGV is doing, I think they're just probably having a little bit of fun, is... I have lecture theatres with 600 to 800 students to control, trust me. Someone singing HMS Hood is not going to faze me on that one. That is what I hope. I think I will myself also go and sub on King George V's channel just to see if there is singing. If there isn't, I'm going to be very disappointed. Okay. Ooh, Battle of Champions is an awesome story. 3 survivors, 1 Spartan, 2 Agrosians. Huge. Painful. HMS Pinafore redone on a tribal. That would be a scary, scary thing. For some people. Quite funny to watch. But, there isn't at the moment. That's disappointing, Kevin, to hear. Oh, God. Daniel, did you have to share out the class? I now have an image of something like HMS Gurkha wearing a nice little dress. Oh, God, that's scary. That would be so scary. Martino, what are your thoughts on the planned Lion-class BBs? Would they have been a good fit for the RN, as they would have similar bow to the KGVs, and they were considered wet ships? I'd hope they'd have fixed the bow. Vision, on Birmingham's wheelhouse, is it deep in the hull, forward steering position? That seems to be the case on the Belfast. I'm going through the museum website. Yep. Kahan, most recent use of modern gunfire support using main gun. Officially, probably the Al4 Peninsula. Unofficially, I'm reckoning some stuff's probably happened off Africa and in Southeast Asia. Strub, Doctor, could you do a talk on what the command structure, class, and types of the Far East Raiders would have looked like if the RN stuck with their plan? Yeah, I can do that. That's all written down. Seriously, who'd win HMS Hood versus HMS King George V? If unreconstructed, probably King George V. If reconstructed, then Hood might have a chance. Tony Penfold, any European navies rearming for the President's mission? I would argue the Royal Navy and the Type 31 class are shamelessly going after the President's mission. Shamelessly. Oh, Brock, you brought the anime. We've been over this. Carl Harmon, dear God, he's not even behind by a minute. How's this happened? It happens occasionally. I catch up. I'll be back in a second. Just have them calling to me. Yeah. Uh-huh. Danny Freeman, Brock Payne. I was thinking more something made of sailcloth and fitted with the real, not quite 2,000-ton ships. Happy. What about flatman gunboats? They seem useless to me, but built in large numbers and by many navies. They are a part of their time. But let's be honest, they are only of their time. Jared, the Lithuanian Navy is expanding for Baltic Ops. That they are. Why is the Royal Navy sometimes referred to as the Andrew? That is an old and long story. Not one I should probably get into here. Bandholm. One could argue that the Danish Amsterdam class is used as a President's ship spot. You could argue that. You could. They're very big on that size for President's mission. But you could certainly argue it. Yeah, that's water. What are the requirements of a President's ship? Basically, they have to be quite stylish in terms of they have to look good and impressive. And they have to have space to entertain, and they also have the range and the position to move around themselves. So basically, they have to be a balance of warship and mobile embassy. You know, slightly more emphasis on warship than a royal yacht would have, but, you know, still some of it. Mitchell Oates, if reconstructed, yeah. Tony Penfold, but any other navies, or is it going to be RN, USN, RSCN, and RAN doing the President's mission? Globally, probably it's going to be them. I do keep looking at the Chinese Navy and wondering if they're going to build a decent President ship, and they don't seem to it. Carmen, are the Hunt class being used for President's missions currently in the Gulf, along with the minesweepers, and should they just be replaced? They be replaced by other ships? Well, they should be replaced eventually by other mine class ships, and currently, yes, they are being used in part for the President's mission. It's the old sloops from the President's mission. Remember, sloops used to do minesweeping as well, so it's no surprise you have minesweepers out there. They are basically the modern sloops. Paul Johnson, India and China are together. Do you think it's going to escalate shit the same with Korea? We can hope not. Berliner, Melder, CVA1, how did they go from all but laid down to cancelled? A first Sea Lord who wasn't very good at politics. Thank you, King George V. Dr. Clark, you have got my sub. Any thoughts on the Royal Navy carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth? You see, the Royal Navy's gone with good design for what they need to do, and I think if they can get 3 LHDs with ski ramps fitted, then you end up with 5 ships with a flight deck, with the flight deck that can all take the same aircraft mix. So then you have a guaranteed of 2 available for any operation, and you have probably at least 1, if not 2, big well decks available. So that's the thing. The Queen Elizabeth class fit with the Royal Navy's idea of, and the thing the Royal Navy can do. The Royal Navy is now going to be able to have enough aircraft and enough carriers to be able to have a Caterpillar fleet and an LHD fleet. So it can't really have enough LHDs really to do what it needs to do. So the thing is, if you can get a mixture of the two and they are interoperable, the aircraft between them and you can use Marines off a carrier if necessary, but you can also use the strike aircraft off the LHD if necessary. Then that makes life a lot easier for a medium power navy. So that's the thing. Okay, Kevin Taggart. I would like to see HMS Hood equipped with Jellicoe's mega depth charges. Oh, ooh. HMS Hood and King George V and Vanguard versus Yamamoto. I would put the money on the Royal Navy crew on that one, especially if Hood had been reconstructed, which he would have been by that point, and KGV and Vanguard versus Yamamoto. So a fairly good fire control system. Osprey 28. What makes the LCS bad? It doesn't seem like a bad idea on service. It's not a bad idea on service. On service, it's a very good idea. It's the execution that's gone wrong. That is the problem. It's the execution. See what? Jefferson gunboats arise again. Royal Navy shook in the yeah. The Jeffersonian gunboats were cute. Martin already. I know I've already muted it, but would it be possible for you to talk on the Anglo-US war that never happened? As recently watched the doc on a Plan Red and Plan 1 naval side, would be interesting. Yeah, happy to do that. Shrub, Doctor, you praised the white colour. I will note the US Coast Guard still maintains with its iconic racing strip. Can you explain why white is good for the diplomatic mission and other ops? Because it looks impressive, okay? White is basically you turning up and going, I'm pristine, look at how neat, how tidy I am. Therefore, I'm amazing. But also, I am so confident in my ability to defend myself. I am so confident in my own abilities. I will be a great white big target. And also, most importantly, because I'm painted white, you can't then claim that you are threatened by my presence because I am this beautiful white ship. That's the thing. Okay. Lionheart X-Ray. As Lane announced HMS Eskimo, and I instantly thought of you going, yay, Trouble Class. Yeah, well, it's yay, Trouble Class. Just wait until the next video goes up. Jeff Beeler, Chinese present ships are in their Coast Guard. Traditionally, I would have said yes, but the more I've looked at their Coast Guard, the more and more I'm suspect of them as actually being present ships. Donald Fritz, could you take a large World War II DD hull and transform it into a 21st century service command? Probably, but it wouldn't be a high-end one. it would be one of the lower end vessels, because it's the size and space of things. Do you know 191? Ever heard the story of Gneisenau's escaping a British battleship by telling it was HMS Emerald? No. Wouldn't have surprised me if they tried it, though, but, you know. Gneisenau spent most of the war, well, once she was out of decommissioned, you know, she was having her guns and going to have her guns upgraded, never got them upgraded, which is why Scharnhorst goes out solo, and the Battle of North Cape just has one battleship victim. C1, reading on US World War I, putting about 4 Pipers on Armed Command in Ireland. Smoothly tied into the convoy system and appreciated by the commander, great relief to his mission. Yeah, they were. They were very useful. Angus Sonner, how did teams onshore coordinate offshore fire support? Did they use identical maps? They did. They had special maps for the occasion to try and work it out. And they had coordinated references. How many Queen Elizabeth class battleships in our class act could Yamamoto and Musashi fight and win? Carl Hardman. If you've got Yamamoto and Musashi as a pair, and they have no support, and the Queen Elizabeth class battleships... Well, let's put it this way. If you have 8 of the Queen Elizabeth class and R class there, then Musashi and Yamamoto are not going to have a nice time. In fact, they're probably going to end up getting sunk. Because the thing is, their fire control isn't that great at dealing with multiple targets. So they can engage one target at a time. So as long as they're engaging at equivalent ranges, then theoretically 3 or 4 Queen Elizabeths, 4 Queen Elizabeths, let's say, could probably take them out quite easily. Probably less, but, you know, I'm having nice for freak shots for a hood scenario happening. Richard Hughes, remember, a minute silence for Drax Computer. We are all hoping Drax Computer is going to be working soon. Strub, Doctor, why is the USN going back to LSTs versus an APD layout? Because once you're going smaller ships, LSTs start to make sense. When you've got the big ships, it's the LPD and LHD scenario. And you still need the big ships, especially if you're going to do the big landings of brigades, etc. But if you're looking at company or smaller, then actually an LST system makes sense. Jeff Bealow, saw a recent video of Queen Elizabeth's F-35Bs making a rolling landings, allowing them to retain more weight. Sounds good. All right. Did Drax Computer get bricked, Jerison? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I hope not. I hope not. I think he's just been overworking it. Lion Hard X-Ray, as far as best modern paint job for military paint hull, Cape Class Australia Coast Guard with the blue and red. Yeah, I'd go there. Martin Dorry, in today's climate, would it not make sense for the RN to form a permanent task force with RAN, RNZN, RCN, possibly Royal Indian Navy in the Indian Ocean Pacific, based out of Singapore and Australia to back up the USN? It could be, but it's going to get them to that, and it probably will be under the 5 powers heading. Donna Fritz, why did the US Coast Guard take harpoons off the high endurance cutter? Because they hadn't maintained them, hadn't maintained their capabilities, so they were no longer really viable. Take care, Jay. Right then. Did Gunfire Legits was on Gneisenau when they did that. They got away without firing a shot. Ah, good for them. Frederick Vigo, in the Battle of the River Plate, what would have happened if Cumberland was also present? Oh, if you have a proper county there, if you have a proper county, along with the baby county, and 2, well, you probably end up with an 8-inch and 6-inch cruiser in each group. So you have a split fire completely. They have 8-inch and 6-inch shells coming from both sides. in the nicest way. Cumberland was pissed off because they'd already lost them twice. So, yeah, that would be a grudge match. Ben and Nora, what was worse for the RN? 1957 white paper or withdrawal east of Suez? Probably east of Suez, because when you're withdrawing in, you can then lose. The 57 white paper is problematic, but once you're withdrawing from Suez, you have a lot of issues in terms of retaining, in terms of making the case for stuff. Nighthawk production. What do you think of World of Warships? What if ships? HMS Conqueror 1949 BB has a Vanguard hull, but has a bridge closer to rebuilt QEs. Realistic, or developers making products distinct and desirable? I haven't seen it, so I don't know. HMS Prince of Wales is not going to get sold King George V. They've been talking about that since the beginning, but it's kind of like they were going to sell Invincible, Illustrious, or Ark Royal. They don't actually do it. It's a lot of paper talk goes into it. I must remember, worst case scenarios often get leaked out to the papers for various reasons. I can't think why, though. Bad Home. How much will missiles be part of modern naval gunfire support, even if they are not really guns? They're quite a big part of it. Let's be honest, cruise missiles are critical for it, for extending its range. But on-call fire support is probably still going to be released to guns, because missiles are expensive for that. Vision, Banzai found lower steering position on the platform deck. HMS Birmingham. So orders will be sent down by voice pipe from compass platform and upper bridge. Yep. Steam White. Really, the entire movie Sink the Bismarck needs a remake. Been what, over 6 years? No Vanguard has stand in, and no. Wait. They would. Let's be honest. Hollywood would have fun with that one. Production. Sorry, Flon. If Conqueror had been built, pursued, would it have been a bridge like Vanguard, or is it in the game? Probably as it is in the game. Juno. Now cruise missiles fired out of gun. Oh. No, you sort of they're probably just guns. Paul Johnson, best 6-inch gun in World War II. Oh. Well, my personal favourite is the Mark 23 of the Royal Navies, but the Mark 24 was also fairly good, but the Mark 24 never really ended service. But it would have been good. The Mark 24 is the mythical sort of gun in some respects. It's designed for the super towns, and it would have... It's one of the interesting scenarios when they're looking at it. The idea was 4 quadruple turrets, a triple turret, and all sorts of things. And it doesn't ever get built, of course, but it would have been absolutely amazingly much firepower. Then if anyone seen like you could do a set of films of 1939-41 RN Kriegsmarine battles of big soldiers. Could be nice, fairness, they would be. Okay. Strub, I don't know this as well as earlier, but how important would naval gunfire support be during an invasion of Japan? It would be critical. By King George V, it would be very, very critical. Have a nice evening. Basically, they would have needed it to fill in all sorts of gaps, especially for the in terms of the artillery and the shore landings and the troops getting ashore. Tony Penfold, what was wrong with the Tide class's 6-inch guns? They try to be clever, and it doesn't really work out that well. Mitchell David Oates, a Navy friend was on Wisconsin vs. Gulf War. Watched Iraqis trying to surrender to their drone on CCTV after gunfire support mission whilst eating on mess decks. Yeah, interesting. Federico Vago, when did diesel engines become common warships? I believe the Graf Spade one. Pretty much it's the 1920s, 1930s they start to be more common. There are still diesel engines on quite a lot of ships. There's usually gas powered, but you often have a combination of Kodag, which is no, I don't know. Yeah, that is combined diesel and gas, electric, or some engines used. Jeff Beeler, what are people fascinated? Some really fascinated by HMS Hood. Was there really a mighty Hood cult in the 20s and 30s? She certainly had a cultural following. Let's leave it at that. How much, Osprey 28, how much longer will the stream be up? I will probably finish it in about 5 minutes because the fluffy research assistant is starting to make noise, so probably wants his evening walk. And Juno 199, what would be the chance of 2 Iowa class battleships, New Jersey and Wisconsin, being ready to come back into active service? Very, very remote. It would be quite difficult to get them back into service quickly, or at all, really. Martin, do you think the Iron are still missing the free batch Type 22s and batch free Type 22s? And what chance do you think of HMS Bristol being saved by preservation? I hope Bristol's safe preservation, and myself. It is annoying to have lost the Type 22s, the batch free ones. They were good ships, but I would have preferred to have kept the free Type 23s, which were sold to Chile, because to keep 16 ships versus keeping 13 wouldn't be much more expensive, and those free ships could be really useful now, because if we had them, we would have 22. The Royal Navy would have 22 escorts rather than 19. Most underrated ship for gunfire support. Ooh. Insect class gunboats. They're always underrated, but they were so useful. Vision, put a big video screen and captain's chair in the lower steering position on Birmingham, and you have the US Enterprise from Star Trek. Yeah, pretty much. Danny Freeman, Type 26 is due to have a gas turbine engine and several diesels on it. Yep, that's what they know. Type 31s will have the same as are fitted on the Queen Elizabeth class carriers and the Type 45s. You have gas turbines for the high speed, you have diesels for the chug. Rabid Razorback. Why couldn't Japan hold the United States off with land-based air power? You can build aircraft and train pilots faster than you can build ships, because you can't build enough pilots and you can't build enough planes and train enough pilots to hold back that sheer amount of firepower coming your way. Right, I will make part 2. We'll go live of the introduction. We'll go live at past. I will make it so it does that. Just do this, and then I can make it control. So there'll be, basically, I'll leave this one at 10 past, and the part 2 of the introduction will go live at past. I finished my marking today, so hopefully, I don't have any more coming my way. He says, crossing many, many fingers. I got sent some random stuff to me. I get a lot of student interaction stuff though, so I get sort of the master's students over the summer. I like them though; they're fun. So that's scheduled for 9:30. So night. Thank you very much for watching. Let's make sure I've finished all the questions. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Thank you to everyone who has liked the video. Thank you to everyone who shared the video. Thank you to everyone who's watched the video. Thank you to everyone who is a patron, who's on Discord, everything. It's lovely chatting with you all. And thank you very much to the people who have pre-ordered my book. That's all very, very kind of you. Osprey 28. Have you ever heard of or played Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought? No. I don't think I have. Juno 1 I am. Got to get some music for Twitch stream tonight. Give away an H on World of Warships. Good luck. Danny Freeman, how many of these videos do we need to watch to get an MA? Oh, at least 100. At least 100. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. And as I said, I'm going to go now, but night. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for the super chats. Thank you to everyone who is patron of these things. You really are paying for my book bills, which is critical because the book bills are an expensive addiction. And thank you very much. Take care. Have a nice evening.